Introduction, modified with call to action. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Now, before we begin, grab your softest blanket or your favorite hoodie. Snuggle into whatever makes you feel most at ease. Make sure your phone is set to night mode. And if you're enjoying these sleepy walks through history, remember to subscribe, leave a gentle comment, and tell us where in the world you're tuning in from tonight. Now, imagine yourself wrapped in warmth, still and safe. Outside your window, the world has quieted. Inside, the buzz of the day begins to melt away. The to-do lists are gone. The rush is over. There is nothing urgent, just the soft rhythm of the past unfolding like an old scroll. Tonight, we'll take a slow, dreamy walk through the strange, busy, and often baffling streets of ancient Rome. You've heard of Rome's glory, its emperors, its temples, its armies. But that's not where we're going. This isn't about conquest or glory. It's about the awkward, itchy, sometimes smelly truth of daily life in a city that was complicated. You'll visit the crowded public baths. You'll hear what people actually wrote on their walls. You'll meet poets, soldiers, slaves, and schoolboys. And you'll find out why magical curses and communal toilets were just normal. So close your eyes if you like. Picture dusty sandals on sun-baked streets. Hear the hum of Latin voices echoing through archways. Smell fresh bread from the bakery. And something a little less pleasant drifting in from the alley. This is not the Rome of textbooks. This is the Rome of bad plumbing, awkward dinner parties, and long, sweaty days under the Mediterranean sun. This is why, if you ever woke up there, you probably wouldn't last a day. Let's begin where many Romans did, in a place filled with steam, chatter, and many, many strange smells. The public bathhouse. Why you wouldn't last a day in a Roman public bath. Imagine this. You're in ancient Rome. The sun is still up, and the day is long. You've just finished work, maybe as a merchant, a teacher, or even a slave sent on errands. And now, like most Romans, you head to the bathhouse. Not for a quick shower. Oh no, for a long, social, slightly awkward, very public cleansing ritual. But don't get too excited. The Roman bath is not exactly relaxing. And it's definitely not private. First, you enter the apoditorium, the changing room. It's loud. People are talking, laughing, sometimes arguing. You find a bench, but there's nowhere safe to put your things. If you're poor, maybe you don't even have much. If you're rich, you hire a slave to guard your clothes, or someone might steal them. Yes, while you're washing, someone might literally walk off with your only tunic. Now you undress. Completely. Everyone is naked here. Men, women, children, though usually in different areas or at different times. There's no modesty. No curtains. No towels. If you're shy, this would be deeply uncomfortable. If you're a modern person used to private showers, this is basically a nightmare. You move next to the tepidarium, the warm room. It's steamy and dim. The air is thick, not with lavender or citrus, but with sweat, damp wood, and old bodies. People sit or lie on benches, chatting or dozing. Their skin glistens. You try to relax, but you're sweating too much to feel calm. Then comes the caldarium, the hot room. Really hot. Think sauna. There's a large, heated bath and small pools of warm water. The floor is hot under your feet. The walls drip with condensation. You're sweating even more now. Some people pour water over themselves with ladles. Others use a strigil, a curved metal scraper, to remove sweat and dirt from their skin. No soap, just oil, sweat, and scraping. A slave might help you with this if you're wealthy. If not, you do it yourself or ask a friend. Either way, bits of dirt, oil, dead skin, and body hair are flying everywhere. This somehow is normal. The scraping isn't gentle. It can hurt. It can leave marks. And people don't always clean the strigils. Imagine using the same metal tool someone else used earlier. And then you realize, no one's really cleaned the water either. It's warm. It's relaxing. But it's also cloudy. And it smells a little off. Then you head to the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. After sweating for so long, it's supposed to be refreshing. You lower yourself into the icy water. It hits you like a slap. People gasp. Some splash. It wakes you up, but not in a good way. You might think, surely now I'm clean. Well, maybe. But diseases spread easily in these public baths. Skin infections, eye problems, even parasites. There are no disinfectants. No showers. If someone has something, you might catch it too. And let's not even talk about what children do in the water. To make things worse, there are no proper toilets inside. Just a small room off to the side with a stone bench. Holes in the bench. Underneath, a channel where waste flows sometimes. There's a sponge on a stick instead of toilet paper. Everyone uses the same sponge. It sits in a bucket of vinegar water. Not exactly hygienic. Still, the baths are important. This is where people meet friends, talk politics, read poetry, or gossip about neighbors. Some conduct business deals. Others flirt. Some come just to get warm, especially in winter. And if you're poor, this is one of the only places with hot water. Your home doesn't have plumbing. No private tub. So you come here, even if it means stepping into water shared by 100 others. Imagine the sounds, the echoes of splashing, the murmur of Latin conversation, the scrape of strigils, the hiss of steam rising from hot tiles. There's laughter too, sometimes shouting. Children squealing as they jump into the cold pool. Now imagine the smells, a mix of body odor, oil, mildew, maybe even urine. The scent of old sweat cooked by heat. And the sharp bite of vinegar from the communal sponge bucket. You dry off somehow. There are no fluffy towels. Maybe a cloth. Maybe nothing. If you're lucky, your slave held onto your clothes. If not, you might find your tunic gone. People have been robbed naked before. You leave the bathhouse tired, maybe cleaner than before, but also wondering what invisible things now cling to your skin. And yet, you'll be back tomorrow. Because the baths aren't just about washing. They're about being Roman. Everyone comes here. Emperors, soldiers, beggars, philosophers. It's part of daily life. And if you don't come, people might think you're odd. Still, if you're used to modern hygiene, clean tiles, warm water on demand, and a private bathroom with soap and a door that locks, this whole experience would feel uncomfortable at best, terrifying at worst. So yes, the Roman baths were impressive. Huge stone buildings, intricate heating systems, art on the walls. But the experience? It wasn't exactly a spa day. You'd probably last 10 minutes before asking to go home. Assuming your clothes weren't already stolen. Now that we've toweled off, let's step out into the streets of Rome, where another kind of chaos is brewing. One man, with sharp eyes and careful words, tried to make sense of it all. Let's meet him next. His name is Pliny the Younger. Life of Pliny the Younger, a witness to chaos. Let your mind settle again. Breathe in. Now slowly breathe out. Picture the soft sound of a reed pen scratching across parchment. A Roman man sits by a window in the afternoon light. He's not a soldier, not a gladiator, not an emperor. He is something quieter. A writer, a thinker, a letter writer, especially. And thanks to his letters, we know more about what it felt like to live in ancient Rome than we do from almost anyone else. His name is Pliny the Younger. Not exactly a thrilling nickname, but it makes sense. His uncle, also named Pliny, is known as Pliny the Elder. You'll hear more about him later. For now, imagine Pliny the Younger at his desk. He's calm, polite, and just a little bit fussy. He cares a great deal about good manners, the proper way to speak, and how people ought to behave in public. He writes with elegance, but also with feeling. He's the kind of person who watches the world closely and writes down what he sees. And what he saw was sometimes terrifying. Let's step back for a moment. Pliny was born in the year 61 CE, in a Roman town called Como. His family was wealthy, so he got a good education. Latin grammar, rhetoric, philosophy, all the things a young Roman aristocrat was supposed to learn. And from a young age, he began writing. Now, Rome in the 1st century was not a peaceful place. Emperors changed often, and sometimes violently. There were plots, poisonings, and public executions. But Pliny stayed out of most of that. He preferred quiet places, books, and long walks. Still, history has a way of dragging people into it. And in the year 79 CE, when he was just 18, Pliny saw something unforgettable. Mount Vesuvius erupted. You may know the story. The volcano exploded. The sky turned black. The cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were buried in ash. Thousands of people died. Streets vanished. Homes disappeared under meters of pumice and dust. And Pliny was there. Well, close by. He was staying across the Bay of Naples with his mother and uncle. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, was a naturalist, a man who studied the world. When the volcano began to erupt, Pliny the Elder rushed to investigate. He climbed aboard a boat and sailed straight toward the smoke. He took notes as he went, but the ash and heat were too much. He collapsed on the shore and died. Pliny the Younger watched it all from a safe distance. Years later, he wrote 2 letters describing what happened. These letters are the earliest detailed description we have of a volcanic eruption. He didn't write with panic or drama. Just calm, clear words. He described how the cloud from the volcano looked like a pine tree, rising high, then spreading out. He described the trembling ground, the falling ash, and how people panicked and fled, holding pillows over their heads to protect themselves. He ended the letter simply. Darkness fell. Not the darkness of night, but of a room that's been shut for a long time. His calm words still echo across the centuries. But that wasn't the end of Pliny's writing. As he grew older, he became a lawyer, then a judge, and finally a governor of a Roman province in what is now Turkey. And through all of this, he kept writing letters. Hundreds of them. To friends. To family. To politicians. Even to the Emperor Trajan. Thanks to these letters, we get a rare look into Roman life. Not the battles or the speeches, but the little details. For example, Pliny complains about noisy neighbors. About how hard it is to concentrate when people are shouting in the courtyard. He describes a lazy day at the baths. He talks about the joy of reading a new poem or hearing someone perform a piece of music. In one letter, he describes a young girl who died too soon, and he writes about how sad he felt. In another, he debates whether to publish his latest book. He worries people won't like it. He wonders if the writing is too soft, too gentle. He even writes about haunted houses. Yes, really. In one letter, he tells the story of a house in Athens where people heard chains rattling at night. A ghostly figure appeared. The house was abandoned. Then a brave philosopher moved in. He followed the ghost, found a skeleton buried in the yard, and after giving it a proper burial, the ghost disappeared. It's a spooky tale, but again, Pliny tells it gently. As if to say, here's a curious story. Make of it what you will. He writes about everyday things too. The weather, gardens, illness, banquets, even small gossip. Always with care. Always thoughtful. You begin to feel like you know him. Like he's quietly sharing his world with you. One of the most famous letters he wrote was to Emperor Trajan. Pliny had a problem: Christians. At that time, Christianity was still new and viewed with suspicion. Pliny wasn't sure what to do with them. He didn't understand their customs. Should he punish them? Ignore them? He asked the emperor for guidance. In his letter, you can sense his confusion. He's not cruel, but he doesn't understand. The emperor replies, don't hunt them down, but if they break the law, treat them like anyone else. These letters show us a government trying to figure out how to deal with new ideas. It's like watching history happen in slow motion. Through it all, Pliny remains calm, observant, careful, a man who notices things but doesn't shout. He writes not for attention, but for reflection, for memory. He reminds us that Rome wasn't just crowds and chariots. It was also quiet courtyards, stacks of scrolls, the rustle of robes as someone passed by. It was people worrying about their careers, their reputations, their gardens. People not so different from you or me. So next time you hear about a Roman emperor or a famous battle, remember Pliny the Younger, the man with ink-stained fingers, who wrote by lamplight and helped the world remember what it was like to simply be alive in a time of chaos. Now, let's leave his peaceful study behind. The next story is stranger. Quieter, yes, but darker. Imagine holding a small piece of lead in your hands. It's cold. It's heavy. And carved into it are words. Angry words. Magical words. A curse. Because now, we're about to explore a side of Roman life that was whispered about in the shadows. Let's travel to the Roman baths of Britain and discover the cursed tablets of Bath. The cursed tablets of Bath, Roman spite and magic. Let the noise of the Roman city fade for a moment. Now, imagine yourself in a land far from the Roman heart. The hills are green, the air is cool, and the rain falls softly over stone ruins and quiet springs. You are in what the Romans called Britannia. Today we call it England. But 2,000 years ago, the Romans built a special place here. They called it Aquae Sulis. Today we know it as Bath. This town was famous for its natural hot springs, warm water bubbling up from deep underground. The Romans believed these waters had healing powers, and so they built a grand bathhouse and temple complex around them. People came from across the empire to bathe, to rest, to pray, and to curse. Yes, to curse. Not in the way we curse today, with a sharp word under our breath. No, Roman curses were more deliberate, more magical, and sometimes more personal. Let's explore how it worked. Imagine someone has stolen your cloak, or maybe your ring, or your coin purse. You feel wronged, but there's no police to call, no one to help. So you turn to the gods, specifically to the goddess Sulis Minerva. She is a fusion of local Celtic tradition and Roman belief. Her temple sits near the steamy waters, and near it, a person like you might write out your complaint on a small, thin sheet of lead. This is your curse tablet. The writing is small, cramped, sometimes messy. You scratch out the words with a stylus, using all your frustration, all your anger. You ask the goddess to punish the thief, to hurt them, to keep them from sleeping, to make their intestines twist. Yes, people got quite specific. Sometimes you don't know the thief's name. That's okay. You can write something like, "To the goddess Sulis, I give the man or woman who has stolen my cloak. May they not eat, may they not drink, may they not sleep, until they return it. If they are named Marcus or Gaius or Lucia or Claudia, let them suffer until justice is done." Some curses list every possible name the writer can think of. Dozens of names, just to make sure the guilty one is included. When you finish your tablet, you roll it up tightly or fold it into a square. Then you walk to the sacred spring. Steam rises from the water. You whisper a few last words to the goddess. Then you drop your cursed tablet into the water. The spring swallows it. It joins hundreds of others. For nearly 2,000 years, they stayed there, resting underwater, until archaeologists found them. Now we can read them, and they tell us a lot. They tell us that Roman people, even far from home, carried their superstitions with them. They believed that words could hurt, that gods listened, that justice could come through magic. But they also tell us about everyday problems. One tablet complains about someone stealing a pair of gloves. Another talks about losing a pan. Some are angry. Some are desperate. A few seem almost sad. One person asks the goddess to punish the thief unless the item was taken by mistake. Then, they ask that no harm be done. It's strangely gentle. These cursed tablets remind us that magic was part of Roman life. Not just in far-off temples or during secret ceremonies, but in public places. People used it for love, for revenge, for protection. Magic wasn't strange to them. It was normal. At Bath, some tablets have strange symbols. Some are written backwards. Others are filled with nonsense words. Syllables meant to sound magical even if they don't mean anything. Like a spell from a forgotten language. And these weren't just poor people. Rich Romans cursed too. Magic crossed class lines. Everyone at some point felt powerless. And for the powerless, curses offered control. Of course, not everyone believed in them. Some laughed. Some thought they were silly. But many didn't. Many truly feared them. If you knew someone had cursed you, you might fall ill just from worry. Today, if you visit Bath, you can still see the spring. The water still bubbles. The steam still rises. And behind glass in the museum, you can see the tablets, small, bent, worn by time. Each one like a whisper from the past. They seem simple, but they're powerful. Not because the curses worked, but because they show how much people felt. They wanted fairness. They wanted justice. They wanted peace. And they believed the gods might help them get it. So, as you picture the warm spring water, the soft clinking of metal tablets sinking below the surface, you can almost hear their voices. Angry, hopeful, human. Now let's step back into the streets of Rome. You're invited to dinner. But not just any dinner. A feast at the home of a wealthy Roman patrician. It sounds like it should be wonderful. Fine wine, delicate dishes, luxurious surroundings. But you might be surprised by what you find. Because Roman dinners were often strange. And sometimes downright unpleasant. Let's take a seat at the table. Dinner with a patrician, rich, weird, and gross. The sun is setting over Rome. Shadows stretch across marble courtyards and tiled rooftops. Lamps are lit with olive oil. The air smells of baking bread, crushed herbs, and warm dust. And somewhere, beyond a heavy wooden gate, a grand dinner is about to begin. You've been invited. Not as a close friend, exactly. More like a curiosity. The host is a patrician, a wealthy Roman of high status, and he likes to show off. Your presence will add variety to the evening. Maybe you're an artist, or a writer, or simply a newcomer with interesting stories. But tonight you are a guest. The house is large. Not like a palace, but impressive. You enter through the atrium, where a small pool of water reflects the flickering lamp light. Slaves move quietly through the hall. You are led into the triclinium, the dining room. But there are no chairs. Instead, there are low couches arranged around three sides of a square table. You're meant to recline, yes, lie down, on your left elbow while eating with your right hand. It's awkward. If you're not used to it, it's uncomfortable. Your feet stick out behind you. You keep sliding. and you can't help but feel strange lying down while someone places food in front of you. But this is how the Roman elite dine. As you settle in, you glance around. The room is decorated with painted walls, scenes of gods, animals, and myths. Some are beautiful, others are odd. A few are a little rude. The other guests are already gossiping. The host is loudly explaining the origin of the fish sauce he just imported from Spain. Everyone laughs a little too hard. Now the meal begins. Roman dinners were long. Not just a quick bite, but a whole evening. Several courses. And some of them might surprise you. First comes the gustatio, the appetizer course. You're served olives, pickled vegetables, and small sausages. Not too strange. But then comes a dish of dormice, small rodents stuffed with minced meat, herbs, and nuts. They're rolled in honey and roasted. Crunchy on the outside, soft in the middle. This was considered a delicacy. Next, the wine is brought in. But Roman wine is not like today's. It's usually mixed with water, and sometimes with spices, herbs, or even seawater. You sip politely, unsure of the flavor. Then the prima mensa, the main course. A wide tray is brought out. On it is a roasted peacock, complete with its blue and green feathers, which were reattached after cooking for dramatic effect. There's also a jelly made of boiled cow's feet, mixed with fish sauce, and a large plate of boiled sow's udder stuffed with spiced eggs. People clap. The host beams. He's proud of the chef's creativity. You look for bread, or maybe a simple fruit, but those are for later. Now a slave approaches with a bowl and a jug of water. Not for drinking, for washing your hands. There are no forks or knives here. You eat with your fingers, or, if you're lucky, with a small spoon. The hand washing will happen several times tonight. You try to eat slowly, but it's difficult. The flavors are strong, sometimes sour, sometimes sweet, often both. Roman cooking loved mixing sweet and savory in strange ways, like honey-glazed fish or dates stuffed with cheese and pepper. The conversation shifts constantly. Some guests tell clever stories. Others argue about poetry. One man loudly recites a few lines from Virgil. Another quotes a bit of law. The host interrupts often, mostly to brag. Everyone laughs again. You notice that the richer guests are being served larger portions and better cuts of meat. You get mostly sauces and scraps. This is common. Roman hosts often use dinners to show off their wealth by feeding the important guests better than the rest. It's not very polite, but it's expected. The room grows warm from all the bodies, the lamps, the heavy food. You begin to feel sleepy. But the meal isn't over. Now comes the secunda mensa, the dessert. This might include fresh figs, almonds, candied fruits, and cakes made of honey and cheese. There is also wine, more of it now, and some guests begin to loosen up. Laughter grows louder. A few start slurring their words. Someone knocks over a dish. The host begins a long speech about his family history, starting with an ancestor who personally knew Augustus. No one corrects him. You glance at the slaves who move silently through the room, cleaning plates, pouring wine, refilling trays. They aren't thanked. Their eyes are lowered. Some are just children. Eventually, the host calls for music. A flute is played. Then a woman begins to sing a soft tune in Greek. It's lovely, but it's hard to focus. Your stomach is full. Your head is heavy, and you're starting to wish you were home. But before the meal ends, there's one last tradition. The symposium, a kind of after-dinner discussion and drinking session. The host asks each guest to speak on a topic. What is the nature of friendship? Or, what makes a man truly wise? It's hard to think clearly after so much wine. You mutter something vague. People nod politely. The next guest talks for a very long time. Some begin to doze. Others keep drinking. At last, the evening winds down. A few guests have thrown up. One has passed out. You are escorted to the door, and a slave hands you your sandals. You step into the cool night air, blinking at the stars. You've survived your first Roman dinner. It wasn't quite what you expected. No pasta. No tomatoes. No garlic bread. Just strange meats, strong flavors, social rules, and uncomfortable reclining. You're full. A little dizzy. And very glad it's over. The elite Romans lived in luxury, yes. But sometimes that luxury was a bit much. Now, let's leave the dinner behind and head somewhere even less comfortable. A training ground. Stone walls. Metal weapons. Shouts in the air. We're about to visit a Roman gladiator school. And if you think it sounds exciting, you might want to think again. Gladiator school was a nightmare. The room is still and quiet. Now, imagine waking up on a rough straw mattress. long before the sun rises. Your body aches. The air is cold. You can hear others around you stirring in the dark. A cough. A groan. Someone praying softly under their breath. This is not your home. You are inside a ludus, a Roman gladiator school. But this is no school in the way you might imagine. There are no books. No friendly teachers. No praise for good effort. This is a place where men are turned into weapons. And you are one of them. Let's start at the beginning. You probably didn't choose this life. Some gladiators were volunteers, but most were not. Many were slaves, captured in wars or sold off due to debts. Others were criminals, condemned to fight. Some were people the emperor or the court simply wanted to get rid of, quietly and painfully. Even the volunteers, octorati as they were called, signed away years of their lives. Some hoped for fame, others for food and shelter. But once inside, everyone was treated the same. You were property. The lanista or trainer owned you now. He could punish you, sell you, starve you, or kill you. And each day in the ludus began with training. Not just a little exercise. This was hard, physical, endless practice. Imagine spending hours swinging a wooden sword that weighs more than a real one. Over and over. Your arms go numb. Your shoulders burn. You practice footwork across hot sand. You learn to block, strike, duck, and lunge. You repeat the same movement until your legs shake. You're given a training partner, but the matches aren't playful. They're serious, and sometimes bloody. Mistakes can break bones. The sun climbs higher. The heat becomes unbearable. You aren't allowed to stop. The doctors, the drill instructors, shout in Latin. They carry sticks. If you move too slow, they strike you. If you fall behind, they laugh. You train with different weapons. A short sword called a gladius. A heavy net. A trident. A curved blade. A round shield. A square one. Each gladiator type has a style. You are taught yours, whether you like it or not. And the armor? It's not comfortable. It's heavy. It chafes your skin. It traps heat. And when you finally return to your room, if you can call it that, you are soaked in sweat, sore, and covered in sand. There is no privacy. You live in a large dormitory, crammed in with dozens of other fighters. Some are loud. Some are quiet. Some are cruel. Others afraid. You learn quickly who to trust and who to avoid. The food is surprisingly good. Gladiators were fed a special diet to build bulk and strength. Mostly barley, beans, and porridge. Sometimes dried fruit or cheese. Meat was rare. You were given water. Sometimes wine. But you were never given peace. Even sleep is difficult. There are guards. There are rules. You dream of the day you might be chosen for a real fight. And at the same time, you dread it. Because real fights mean real danger. Yes, it's true. Gladiators didn't always fight to the death. That was expensive. Gladiators were trained, and training cost money. But death happened anyway. Accidents. Mistakes. Or simply bad luck. Imagine the day you are chosen. The games are coming. You're marched to the amphitheater with your group. The crowd is already gathering. You can hear the rumble of voices. The clatter of feet on stone. The shouts of vendors selling bread and oil. You are handed your gear. Your armor gleams in the sunlight. It feels too tight. Your sword is sharp this time. Very sharp. You're pushed into a dark hallway. Then a gate opens, and you step into the light. Tens of thousands of people are watching. They cheer. They chant. Some call your name. Others scream for blood. You face your opponent. Maybe you've trained together. Maybe you've shared meals. It doesn't matter now. You circle each other slowly. You wait for the signal. Then the fight begins. There's no time to think. You block, strike, dodge. You feel your pulse in your ears. Your breath comes in gasps. The sand underfoot slips. Your legs shake. You see his blade flash. You stumble. Then either you fall or he does. If you win, you raise your hands to the crowd. They may cheer. They may not. If you lose, you fall to your knees. And sometimes, the emperor or the game's master will hold up a thumb, down or up. Life or death. Sometimes mercy is given. Sometimes not. And if you're wounded, there's the medicus, the doctor. He will treat your injuries with vinegar, wine, or a hot iron. No painkillers. No stitches unless you're lucky. Just gritted teeth and rough cloth. You return to the ludus. If you can walk. If not, someone drags you. And then you heal. And you train again. Because that's life in the gladiator school. It is hard. It is brutal. And for many, it is short. But here's the strange thing. Some gladiators became heroes. They were admired. Praised. even loved. Children knew their names. Women sent them letters. Poets wrote about them. Some were given prizes. Money. Freedom. But many were not. Most died young. Most were forgotten. And yet, the crowd always wanted more. So next time you see a picture of a Roman gladiator, shiny armor, proud stance, sword raised, remember what came before that moment. The sore muscles, the wooden swords, the broken sleep, the fear, the nightmare of gladiator school. Let's step away from the arena now, back into the city. This time we'll enter through a narrow door, down a dark hallway, into a life that was even harder and far more common. Because now, you're not a guest, not a gladiator. You are a Roman slave. The life of a Roman slave. The Roman world was built on many things: stone, law, roads, and empire. But underneath all of it, holding it up in silence, were millions of people who had no freedom at all. They were not citizens. They had no rights. They were not allowed to marry, to own property, or to protect their own children. Their names were not recorded in official histories. They did not write letters or build temples in their honor. And yet, without them, Rome could not have functioned. They were slaves. Now, imagine yourself waking in a tiny room, barely large enough to sit up. There is no window. The floor is hard. You slept without a blanket. It is early. The sun has not risen. But your day has already begun. You are a service, a slave in a Roman household. Maybe you work in the kitchen, stirring pots of lentils and barley before the family wakes. Or perhaps you clean the marble floors, wiping away footprints and dust, even though they will be dirty again within the hour. If you are strong, you might be sent to the market. You carry heavy baskets of produce on your back. You wait in line while free citizens push ahead of you. You are ignored. You are invisible. You do not speak unless spoken to. Your master or dominus might be kind, or cruel. That is entirely up to him. The law will not stop him if he beats you, locks you up, or sells your child. Let's walk through some of the jobs a Roman slave might do. If you're unlucky, you work in the latifundia, large country farms. Here, the work is endless. You plow fields, harvest grain, tend to animals. The sun is hot. The tools are heavy. The overseer carries a whip. Food is basic, rest is rare, and injuries are often left untreated. If you work in the mines, the danger is even worse. Underground tunnels are cramped, dark, and filled with toxic dust. Children were often sent down into the tightest spaces. Few who worked in the mines lived long. But not all slaves labored in chains. Some worked in city homes. If you are one of them, your life might seem easier, at least from the outside. You might be a pedagogue, tutoring a wealthy Roman boy in grammar and logic. You might be a cook, preparing meals you'll never taste. You might be a body slave, brushing your master's hair, helping him dress, or holding his writing materials while he dictates letters. There are even gladiator slaves, owned by a lanista, trained for combat. Their lives are dangerous, but sometimes they earn praise or prizes. Some slaves worked in public service, owned by the state. They cleaned streets, repaired aqueducts, or worked in temples. A few were scribes or accountants. Skilled, educated, even respected, but still not free. Roman law said slaves were things, legal property. They could be bought, sold, traded, inherited. A slave might change hands several times in a lifetime. You might be born in Gaul, sold in Carthage, then sent to Rome. Your children, if allowed to live, could also be sold. And yet, in this harsh system, there were small hopes. Rome had a concept called manumission, the act of freeing a slave. Some masters freed loyal slaves in their wills. Others allowed them to buy their freedom by saving tips or wages. A freedman, or libertus, was no longer property. They could marry, own land, even start a business. But they were never fully equal to freeborn citizens. They owed loyalty to their former master, and were often tied to him by law and custom. Still, freedom was a dream that kept many going. Now, imagine the emotional toll. Your name is not your own. Your choices are not your own. You might serve a family for years, raising their children, feeding them, cleaning their home, only to be sold one morning without warning. And yet, you must smile. You must be polite. You must survive. You learn to listen carefully, to move quietly, to guess what your master wants before he says it. You must work hard, but not too fast. Be helpful, but not clever. If you stand out too much, it could bring punishment. In some homes, a slave's entire job was simply to stand silently beside the master, waiting for orders. For hours. Just stand. Slaves were everywhere in Rome. Historians believe that at the height of the empire, nearly one-third of the population in Italy was enslaved. In a city like Rome, you couldn't walk a block without passing someone in chains or someone who had once worn them. And yet, their voices are nearly gone. They left behind no books, no monuments, no statues, but we find their stories in small ways, in broken pottery, scratched graffiti, or records of runaway slaves. Yes, many ran. Rome was surrounded by fugitives, desperate for freedom. Notices were posted offering rewards for their capture. Brown hair, scar on left cheek, speaks Greek. That was someone's entire life, reduced to a description. Some tried to blend in with free workers. Others fled to the mountains. A few were caught and branded with letters on their foreheads. FVG, short for fugitivus, fugitive. But some made it. Some escaped. Some were freed. Some even found happiness. So as you picture the grand villas of Rome, the baths, the feasts, the statues and gardens, remember the quiet hands that made them possible. The people who lit the fires, scrubbed the floors, and carried the stones. Rome was powerful, but its power was built on the backs of those who could not say no. Let us leave the dim corners of the household now. Our next stop is brighter, but no less tragic. The sky turns red. The city shakes. Flames leap between rooftops. It is the year 64 CE, and Rome is on fire. The fire of Rome, Nero's fiddle or fake news. It begins with smoke. Thin at first, curling through the dark streets. The city is quiet. People are asleep. Somewhere near the Circus Maximus, perhaps in a wooden shop filled with cloth and oil, a small flame catches. And then the fire grows. You are in the city of Rome in the year 64 CE. The buildings are close together. Many are made of wood. There are no fire escapes, no water hoses, no alarms. The summer wind picks up. Flames leap from one roof to the next. Tiles crack from the heat. Doors burn where they stand. The fire begins to move faster than any person can run. Now imagine you are waking to the sound of shouting. You step outside barefoot. The air is thick and hot. You see orange light flickering in the sky. Someone is yelling. The insula is burning. The apartment block is on fire. Panic spreads quickly. People grab whatever they can carry. A child, a jug of water, a single bag. But the streets are narrow and crowded. Some paths are blocked by falling debris. Sparks rain down. The wind shifts. A safe road suddenly becomes a dead end. The fire burns for 6 days. Then it pauses. Then it starts again and burns for 3 more. By the end, 2/3 of the city has been destroyed. Homes are gone. Markets are gone. Temples, shops, even sections of the emperor's own palace have vanished into ash. People huddle in the open fields outside the city. They have nothing. No roof. No food. Just smoke in their hair and soot on their skin. And in the middle of it all is one man, Emperor Nero. But what did Nero really do? Did he help? Did he hide? Or, as the famous rumor goes, did he play the fiddle while Rome burned? Let's look more closely. First, the fiddle. That's not quite accurate. The violin did not exist in Nero's time. If he played anything, it was probably the lyre, a stringed instrument, sort of like a small harp. According to some sources, Nero was at his villa in Antium, about 30 miles away, when the fire began. When news reached him, he returned quickly to the city. Some writers say he stood on a private stage and sang of the destruction of Troy, watching the flames with cold curiosity. Others say he opened his gardens to the homeless, provided food and shelter, and even paid for rebuilding efforts. So which is it? Was Nero a heartless artist who watched Rome burn like a stage play? Or a troubled ruler trying to calm a city in chaos? The truth is, we don't know. And that's partly because most of what we know about Nero comes from historians who disliked him. Writers like Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio painted him in a dark light. They called him arrogant, theatrical, and cruel. They said he murdered his own mother and wife, that he raced chariots in the streets, that he was obsessed with performing. It's hard to separate fact from rumor. But one thing is certain, the people of Rome wanted someone to blame, and Nero gave them a target. He blamed a small, unfamiliar group. A group many Romans didn't trust. A group that worshipped only one god. A group that refused to bow to Roman idols. He blamed the Christians. It was the first time they were officially persecuted in the empire. Nero had them arrested. Some were torn apart by dogs. Others were burned alive as torches to light his gardens at night. It was a terrible act, cold, calculated, and meant to turn public anger away from him. It worked for a time, but Nero's reputation never fully recovered. In the years after the fire, he began a grand rebuilding project. He wanted a new Rome, wider streets, more open spaces, stronger buildings made of stone. And in the center of it all, he built his Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It was massive, glittering, filled with marble, mosaics, pools, and rotating dining rooms. It covered hundreds of acres in the middle of the ruined city. To some, it was a symbol of renewal. To others, a cruel joke. Was the fire used as an excuse to clear space for Nero's palace? Was it a disaster turned into opportunity? Or was it simply a tragedy, made worse by the need to find someone to blame? We may never know, but we do know what it felt like. We know from letters, from ruins, from the burned layers of earth that still lie beneath modern Rome. Archaeologists have found signs of that fire: charred wood, collapsed walls, scorched coins, buried just below the city streets. We know how the people responded. They dug through rubble. They built tents. They prayed to the gods. They whispered stories of bad omens, of angry spirits, of leaders who played music while their world burned. And we know what came after. Rome rebuilt. People returned. The city changed. But the fire stayed in memory, smoke rising through history, never quite fading. So next time you hear that Nero fiddled while Rome burned, remember that stories are powerful. They shape how we see the past. But sometimes the quiet truth beneath the smoke is even more revealing. Now let us turn to something less dramatic, but still just as dangerous in its own way. We're going to look at how the Romans moved water. Their plumbing was famous. But what most people don't know is that it was also a serious health hazard. How Roman plumbing was a health hazard. Rome was famous for many things: its roads, its legions, its emperors. But one of its greatest achievements was something quieter, something beneath your feet. Water. The Romans mastered the movement of water. They built aqueducts, long stone bridges that carried fresh water from the mountains into the heart of the city. Day and night, water flowed over hills, through tunnels, across valleys, and into Rome. It filled public fountains, baths, latrines, and the homes of the wealthy. It was clean, constant, controlled. And yet, it was also dangerous, because sometimes even the most brilliant systems hide silent risks. Let's start with the aqueducts themselves. They were engineering wonders. Imagine miles and miles of carefully tilted stone channels, designed to move water without pumps. The slope was so gentle, just a few inches per 100 feet, but it worked. Gravity did the job. There were at least 11 major aqueducts feeding Rome at its height. Together, they brought in more than 200 million gallons of water each day. Enough for over 1 million people. The water was distributed through a complex system of lead pipes. Yes, lead. In Latin, this was called plumbum, which is where we get the word plumbing. Now, imagine yourself living in an apartment block, or insula, in one of Rome's crowded neighborhoods. You likely didn't have water piped directly to your floor. Instead, you fetched it from a nearby public fountain. If you were lucky, your building had a cistern in the courtyard, filled by the aqueduct at certain times of day. The wealthy had water delivered straight into their homes, into fountains, kitchens, and private baths. Their lead pipes were wide and efficient. Their gardens were green. Their pools sparkled. But here's where the problem begins. Lead poisoning. We now know that lead, when it leaches into water over time, can damage the brain, the kidneys, and the nervous system. It can cause fatigue, confusion, and in severe cases, even madness. The Romans, of course, didn't know this. To them, lead was useful. It was soft, easy to shape, and resistant to rust. They used it for pipes, cooking pots, makeup, paint, even wine preservation. Yes, some Roman wines were stored in lead containers. Others were sweetened with a syrup made by boiling grape juice in lead-lined pans. So not only was water touching lead pipes, but the rich were sometimes drinking lead-laced wine, seasoning their food with lead-based powders, and bathing in warm lead water. Was this enough to poison people? Modern historians and scientists are still debating that. Some believe the amount of lead absorbed through pipes was minimal, since Rome's water was constantly moving, rarely sitting still long enough to pick up dangerous levels. Flowing water doesn't stay in contact with pipe walls for very long. But others point out that repeated exposure, from water, food, and cookware, could build up in the body over time. Especially for the elite, who consumed more wine, used more lead, and had more private plumbing. There's even a theory that lead contributed to the decline of the Roman Empire. According to this idea, the slow damage caused by lead poisoning made Roman leaders irrational, erratic, or mentally unwell. It's hard to prove, but it's an intriguing thought. An empire brought low not just by barbarians or corruption, but by invisible poison in the pipes. Of course, poor Romans weren't drinking fancy wine or dining off lead plates, but they faced other dangers. The public latrines, for example, were impressive. Stone benches with holes, running water beneath, and sometimes even a sponge on a stick for cleaning. But they were also unsanitary. The water meant to wash waste away could sometimes back up. The sponges were shared between strangers. And the smell, described by ancient writers as thick, heavy, and ever-present, lingered in the air. Worse still, dangerous gases could build up in the sewers. Methane and other fumes sometimes ignited when lamps were brought inside. There are stories of explosions, people avoiding public toilets after dark, and even rats and snakes appearing through the holes. And the bathhouses? They seemed clean. But imagine dozens of sweaty bodies soaking in the same warm pool, over and over. The water might be drained at the end of the day, but not always. Some baths were rarely cleaned. Skin oils, dirt, hair, and whatever else clung to the bathers often stayed behind. Archaeologists have found ancient drainage systems clogged with body hair and grease. One scholar once called the baths warm soup made of strangers. And yet, the Romans believed they were being healthy. They washed often. They scraped oil and dirt off their bodies with metal tools called strigils. They soaked. They sweated. They rinsed. But they didn't use soap. And they didn't know about germs. In fact, the very things they thought kept them clean, like warm communal pools and lead plumbing, might have been making them sick. Still, the water never stopped flowing. Even today, in modern Rome, you can see the old aqueducts standing like broken bridges on the horizon. Some of them still carry water. Some were used for centuries after the empire fell. And beneath your feet, ancient pipes, many still made of lead, remain buried in the earth. A reminder that even brilliance has its blind spots. Now, let's dry off and take a walk through the streets. Not the wide, sunny ones with statues and fountains, but the messy walls of back alleys and taverns. What did ordinary Romans write when no one was watching? It's time to explore Roman graffiti, crude, clever, and sometimes surprisingly familiar. Roman graffiti, what they really wrote. The Roman Empire left behind grand monuments, glorious temples, carefully written scrolls, and solemn stone inscriptions. But that's only part of the story. For the rest, we look not at marble, but at plaster. At walls, doorways, and tavern corners. Because sometimes history is written in whispers, and in bathroom stalls. Let's take a walk through Pompeii, the Roman city buried in ash by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. The lava and debris preserved more than buildings and skeletons. It also preserved something far more human. Graffiti. Thousands of short, hand-scratched messages. Some carved with nails, some with bits of charcoal, some just traced with fingers and wet plaster. They were not meant to last. And yet they have. Quiet voices from nearly 2,000 years ago, frozen on walls. Now imagine you're walking down a narrow stone street. The walls are painted with faded colors, reds, yellows, and blues. The air smells faintly of dust and old olives. And here, by the doorway of a small house, you see it. Marcus loves Julia. A simple message. Carved by hand. Maybe with care. Maybe in a rush. Love marked into stone. But love was just one of many topics. On another wall. We have wet the bed. I confess. We laughed about it. A bit awkward. But honest. Further along, outside a tavern. I screwed the barmaid. Crude? Yes. But also revealing. These walls didn't carry the voices of emperors. They carried the words of soldiers, shopkeepers, travelers, and teenagers. Some graffiti was political. Vote for Lucius Papitius Sabinus. He's the people's choice, like campaign posters today, but scratched onto random surfaces, sometimes even into private homes. Supporters would deface rivals' names or correct spelling mistakes in sarcastic ways. There were insults. Celadus the Thracian makes all the girls sigh. Crestus, you are a lazy donkey. Take your boring self somewhere else. There were jokes. I was here earlier, and so were you. Epiphra is not good at ball games. And even bathroom humor. Here I made a mess. In fact, public latrines were filled with graffiti. Ancient bathrooms often had soft, wet plaster walls. Perfect for writing. Not the most refined reading experience, but very popular, it seems. Some graffiti was poetic. If you felt the fire of love like I do, you'd understand. Let whoever loves be well. Let whoever doesn't burst. Others were lonely. O wall, I am amazed you have not fallen from carrying so many boring messages. And some were surprisingly modern. Successus was here. The Roman version of I was here, carved into eternity. But graffiti wasn't just words. There were drawings too. Stick figures. Ships. Gladiators. Animals. Faces. Even what we might now call memes, quick, funny images that made someone laugh for just a moment. One house in Pompeii has a scratched image of a man with a donkey's head, playing a harp. Beneath it, a friend of mine. Another shows a gladiator stabbing his opponent, the caption proudly naming the victor. Maybe it was drawn by the fighter himself. Maybe by a fan. These small marks tell us something that statues do not. They tell us that Roman life was noisy, emotional, and often very funny. That people fell in love, made rude jokes, bragged, complained, gossiped, and teased. That even 2 millennia ago, someone couldn't resist scribbling a heart around their crush's name. And graffiti wasn't just in Pompeii. It was everywhere in the empire, from the walls of military camps in Britain to the sides of buildings in North Africa. In Ostia, the port city near Rome, a graffito reads, "I don't care what you say, I'm still better." No name, just attitude. In Duri Ropos, far out on Rome's eastern edge, soldiers wrote prayers, jokes, and even training schedules on the walls of their barracks. In Rome itself, on a wall of the Palatine Hill, archaeologists found a drawing of a man worshipping a figure on a cross with a donkey's head. Underneath it, in childish script, Alexamenos worships his god. A cruel joke, mocking early Christians, but also a piece of history. These graffiti are not official records. They weren't meant to last. They weren't carved with ceremony or style, but they are real. And in a way, they're the most honest pieces of history we have, because they weren't written for emperors or gods. They were written for a moment. A laugh, a sigh, a feeling. They remind us that history is not just made by the famous. It's also made by the bored teenager scratching a heart on a wall, by the tired worker venting about his boss, by the traveler writing, "I was here," in a language no one speaks anymore. And so, as we leave this alleyway of ancient voices, we head toward a different kind of silence. Not the quiet of a wall, but the quiet of poverty. Because not all Romans left graffiti. Many didn't know how to write. They lived in the shadows of wealth, on the edges of cities, in crumbling buildings and forgotten streets. And in our next segment, we'll visit them. The poor of Ostia. The ones history often overlooks. The forgotten poor of Ostia. The heart of the Roman Empire beat loudly in its capital, but its lungs, the part that breathed in grain, oil, and wealth, were found in a city by the sea. This city was Ostia, the main port of Rome. Imagine yourself arriving in the early morning, the salt air sharp and cool, the faint cries of gulls drifting overhead. Warehouses line the docks. Stacked amphorae, large clay jars, lean against crumbling walls. Sailors shout. Carts rattle over the stone roads. But behind all the movement and trade, beyond the shops and taverns, another world waits. One not of marble columns or bronze statues. It is the world of the poor. In Ostia, as in much of the Roman world, the poor did not live in quiet countryside villas. They lived stacked atop one another, in tall, narrow apartment buildings called insulae. Let's step inside one. The stairway is steep and made of rough stone. It creaks underfoot. The walls are patched with old plaster, darkened by soot from cooking fires. The higher you go, the smaller the rooms become, and the cheaper the rent. You live on the 4th floor. There is no running water, no indoor toilet, just a tiny window and a single room where you cook, sleep, and sit. You might share this space with your children, your parents, or perhaps even strangers. There is no privacy. There is barely enough space to lie down. At night, you listen to the sounds of your neighbors. Someone coughing, a baby crying, a man returning from work, stomping up the stairs. The smell of cooking lentils and smoke fills the hall. And yet this is normal. This is home. In the mornings, you walk to the nearest public fountain to fetch water. If you are lucky, it's not too crowded. You carry your jug back through streets still wet with the washings of butchers and taverns. The ground is slick. You watch your step. You may work as a porter, carrying sacks of grain from ship to warehouse. Or as a dockhand, loading amphorae filled with Spanish olive oil. Perhaps you clean stables, sweep shop floors, or deliver messages. You work hard. You are paid little. If you're a woman, you may sell bread or sew clothes, take in laundry, or cook meals for workers. Some take jobs as wet nurses or nannies in wealthier households. Some work the street corners. Children work too. There are no schools for the poor. No time for games. A boy might follow his father to the docks. A girl might carry firewood on her back, learning to keep a hearth warm in someone else's home. Life is fragile here. If you are injured, you cannot afford a doctor. If you fall behind on rent, you may be thrown out. If a fire breaks out, as they often do in Insulae, there is little chance of escape from the upper floors. Even the food is uncertain. Grain is your lifeline. The government gives it out in rations called the annona, but not everyone qualifies. You stretch what you have: pottage, olives, onions. Sometimes dried fish, rarely meat. Bread is a staple. You eat it slowly, savoring every bite. Entertainment is mostly free and mostly distracting. You attend festivals where food might be handed out. You gather in taverns to hear gossip, or in the forum to listen to street performers. If you can spare a coin, you might squeeze into a theater crowd or bet on dice games in the alleys. Your religion is a mix of old and new. You might pray to household gods called Laras or light incense at a local temple. In Ostia, you may have neighbors who worship Isis, Mithras, or even follow the strange new Christian faith, whispering prayers in back rooms. Life is a pattern. Wake, work, wait, sleep. And through it all, a quiet dignity. Most of the poor in Ostia were not beggars. They worked. They struggled. They endured. They rarely rose far, but they kept the city running, mending sails, hauling bricks, cleaning the floors of temples. And yet, history rarely speaks of them. Their names weren't carved on statues. Their homes were never restored. When the city declined, many of their neighborhoods were simply left to crumble. But archaeology gives us glimpses. Excavations in Ostia have uncovered the remains of Insulae, some with tiny, smoky kitchens, others with communal latrines or staircases worn smooth by thousands of tired feet. We find cheap pottery, broken and repaired. Graffiti, scratched in soft brick. Coins dropped in the dirt, once part of someone's careful savings. We find bones with signs of hard labor. Teeth worn down by rough bread. Joints stiffened by years of bending and lifting. In one small apartment, a preserved oil lamp sits in the corner of a cracked floor. It still holds a faint trace of soot. Someone lit that lamp once. Perhaps they sat near it to eat, or read a scrap of news, or simply stared at the flame, waiting for sleep. And so we remember them, not just the emperors or generals, but the quiet workers who left no monuments. They are the forgotten poor of Ostia. Now, let us stay among the Insulae a little longer, because in our next segment, you won't be visiting the poor. You'll be living as one, in a crumbling Roman apartment, surrounded by strangers, with creaking beams and a leaky roof. Because you live in an insula, and it's falling apart. You live in an insula, and it's falling apart. Imagine waking up to the sound of splintering wood. It is still dark. Your eyes open slowly. A cold draft snakes across the floor. You hear water dripping, slow, steady, and the rustle of mice in the wall. This is your home, a Roman insula. The word insula means island. But these weren't peaceful places surrounded by water. They were the apartment blocks of the ancient world. Tall, crowded, and often dangerously unstable. You live in one of them. Let's step inside. The building is made of brick and wood. It leans slightly to one side. The outside is plain, not painted, with cracks along the plaster that no one has bothered to repair. The lower floor houses a bakery. It smells of ash and overbaked bread. You live on the 5th floor. There is no elevator, just stairs. Dozens of uneven, narrow steps. Some are chipped. One creaks ominously every time you step on it. You've learned to skip it without thinking. Your room is small. It has no window, only a hole high on the wall to let in a little air. The walls are stained with smoke. You have a cot stuffed with straw, a clay jug, a wooden box for your belongings, and a shelf where you keep bread wrapped in cloth to stop the rats from finding it. If you're lucky, you have a tiny stove made of clay bricks. It uses charcoal. It fills the room with smoke. In the winter, the heat is welcome. In the summer, it makes the air thick and hard to breathe. You share a latrine with others on your floor, if there is one at all. Most of the time, you carry your waste down in a bucket and empty it into a public cesspit. Some people don't even bother. They dump it into the street at night. This is part of your daily rhythm. You rise early, before the city grows hot. You climb down the stairs with care, passing neighbors still snoring behind thin wooden doors. On the 2nd floor, someone's cooking barley porridge. The smell is sour and sweet. Outside, you fetch water from the fountain. Back inside, you wash your face with a cloth, sweep the dust from your floor, and hope that nothing has fallen through the ceiling during the night. Yes, the ceiling. Because your roof leaks. It's been patched with tiles and bits of cloth, but rain still comes through. Sometimes whole bricks come loose. Last year, a corner of the building across the alley collapsed in a storm. You remember the sound, loud and sudden, and the panic that followed. You wonder if your own wall will hold. In fact, building collapses were common in ancient Rome. Insulae were often built quickly, by landlords who cared more about rent than safety. The higher the floor, the cheaper the apartment, and the more dangerous. Some buildings rose 5 or 6 stories. There were no safety codes, no inspections, no fire escapes. The stairwells were often made of wood, and fires could spread in minutes. Roman writers complained about it often. One said he would rather live in the countryside than in a building held up by miracle and prayer. Another warned that tenants on the top floors lived closest to the stars and to sudden death. And yet people kept moving in, because there was no choice. Rome's population was huge, over 1 million people at its peak. The rich lived in private homes with gardens and fountains. But everyone else? They were packed into insulae like yours. Some buildings housed over 200 people. You might never learn all their names. At night, the hallways echo with voices, an argument, a lullaby, the clink of cups. Sometimes a baby's cry cuts through everything. Sometimes silence falls like a heavy curtain. You light a small oil lamp. Its flicker dances on the wall. You watch it. You listen to the rain begin outside, tapping the broken roof tiles. A drip falls near your cot. You place a bowl beneath it, as always. Tomorrow you will wake early. You will walk the same stairs. You will hope the building holds. And perhaps, one day, if your luck changes, you might move to a lower floor. The rent will be higher, but so will your chances of surviving the winter. This is life in a Roman insula. Not glamorous, not comfortable, but real. And now, let us step away from this fragile world for a moment. Let us walk into the noise and distraction of Roman entertainment. Because sometimes even the poorest citizens found escape, not in comfort, but in spectacle. A free ticket, a slice of bread, a moment of glory or horror. It's time for bread and circus. Bread and circus, free food, deadly shows. The phrase bread and circus comes from a Roman poet named Juvenal. He wrote that the people no longer cared about liberty or laws. All they wanted, he said, was panem et circenses, bread and circuses. And for many, that was true. When life was hard, when the rent was high, the water was dirty, the streets were dangerous, the promise of free food and thrilling shows was enough to keep people quiet. At least for a while. Now, imagine yourself standing in a long line, just after sunrise. You clutch a wooden token in your hand. A small, round piece marked with a symbol. It is your admission, not to a theater or bathhouse, but to something much bigger. The Colosseum. You move with the crowd. Thousands of people pressing forward. The sun is already warm on your shoulders. You can smell bread being sold by hawkers. You hear children laughing, someone arguing about seats, the distant roar of lions behind the walls. And then you enter. The Colosseum is massive. Its real name is the Flavian Amphitheater, but no one calls it that. The name Colosseum comes from a giant statue of Emperor Nero that once stood nearby. Inside, the stone seats rise in tiers. Up to 50,000 people can fit here. The best seats are at the bottom, reserved for senators, priests, and honored guests. The middle rows are for merchants and soldiers. The very top, where the stone is cracked and birds nest in the corners, is where you sit. From here, the arena below looks like a bowl of golden sand. And soon it will be stained red. But first, the bread. Grain is tossed into the crowd. Sometimes loaves. Sometimes tokens for future rations. The crowd cheers. You catch a crust in midair and hold it like a prize. Then the trumpet sounds. The games begin. First come the Venetians, animal hunts. Trained hunters, called bestiarii, enter the arena. They face bears, lions, wild boars. Some wear armor. Others fight in tunics with nets and spears. The crowd gasps as a panther leaps across the sand. Sometimes the animals win. Then come the executions. Criminals are marched into the arena. Some are tied to posts. Others must fight without weapons. The crowd watches in silence, or with excitement. It depends on the day. Some are thrown to the beasts. Others are forced to reenact myths, like Icarus falling from the sky or Prometheus chained to a rock, only to be attacked by birds. These are not plays. They are deaths. The crowd watches. You watch. Then, at last, the main event. The gladiators. They enter in pairs, sometimes in groups. Their armor shines. Their swords flash in the sunlight. Each man represents a different fighting style. A retiarius with a net and trident, a secutor with a heavy helmet and curved sword, a thraces with a small shield and sickle blade. They fight to the rhythm of the crowd, not always to the death. In fact, gladiators were expensive. They were trained, owned, valuable. Killing one was costly. So unless the fight was part of a special execution, most matches ended when one man surrendered. He would drop his weapon, raise a finger. Then the editor, often the emperor, decided. Live or die. The crowd might chant. Thumbs might turn. But in the end, the decision rested with the one in power. Sometimes mercy was shown. Sometimes not. There are stories of gladiators who fought for years, becoming legends. They were slaves, mostly, or criminals or prisoners of war. Some earned fame. A few earned freedom. But most lived hard and died young. For the crowd, it was entertainment. For the fighters, it was survival. Outside the arena, the games were all anyone talked about. Who won? Who lost? Who bled? Who begged? Children acted out battles with sticks. Merchants sold tiny figurines of famous fighters. Poets wrote odes to fallen champions. Graffiti praised the bravest and mocked the weak. And beneath it all was a quiet truth. The games were not just for fun. They were politics. By giving the people food and distraction, emperors kept them loyal. A restless crowd could become a riot. But a full stomach and a thrilling show? That was peace of a kind. Some emperors, like Titus, gave hundreds of games in a single year. Others bankrupted themselves with festivals and spectacles. They knew that in Rome, public approval was power. And blood bought silence. Now, imagine the end of the day. The sun is setting. The sand is stained. The crowd is leaving. You climb down the stairs, still clutching your crust of bread, your voice hoarse from shouting. Tomorrow, you will go back to your cramped insula. But for a few hours today, you were part of something grand. You watched men fight. You cheered. You forgot your aches, your rent, your leaking roof. That is the power of bread and circus. And now, as we leave the roar of the crowd behind, we walk toward a different kind of arena. One made not of sand and blood, but of dust and discipline. Because our next stop is a Roman army camp. And as you'll see, it was far from glamorous. Life in a Roman army camp, hint, not glamorous. The life of a Roman soldier might sound proud and exciting. You picture polished armor, shiny helmets, and gleaming weapons. You imagine the thrill of battle, the honor of Rome, the cheers of victory. But the truth is, most of the time Roman soldiers were just tired, hungry, and sore. And when they weren't fighting, they were digging. Now imagine yourself as a young recruit in the Roman army. You wake before sunrise. The air is cold. You sleep on a straw mat in a small tent with 7 other men. Your tent is called a contubernium, your squad. You share everything with them. Food, equipment, even cooking duties. Outside, the camp is already stirring. You can hear orders being shouted. Metal clinking. The grumble of men putting on their armor. You get up quickly. You can't be late. Punishment in the Roman army is harsh, even for simple mistakes. Forget your gear, and you may be flogged. Fall asleep on duty, and the whole unit may be punished with decimation. Every 10th man executed. Your body aches from yesterday's march. You carried a pack weighing almost 30 kilograms. Your armor, shield, tools, cooking pot, rations, and spare sandals. The soldiers were sometimes called mules, because of how much they carried. And the marching never seems to end. You walk 20 miles a day through heat, wind, and rain. And when you stop, you don't rest. You build the camp. Every night. Every time. Digging a ditch. Building a wooden wall around the tents. Setting up watch posts. No shortcuts. No exceptions. Roman camps were military machines. Clean. Efficient. Square in shape. Gates on each side. A street grid inside. The general's tent in the center. Latrines in carefully placed corners. The latrines, by the way, are shared. No privacy. Just a long stone bench with holes. Underneath, a running stream of water carries everything away. And yes, you share the sponge on a stick. After breakfast, barley gruel or hard bread, you train. Always training. You practice marching in formation. You throw javelins. You swing wooden swords. You raise your shield until your arms feel like lead. The Romans believed discipline was everything. An army that obeyed orders would win. An army that did not would die. And so you drill, and drill, and drill again. When not training or marching, you dig ditches, build roads, cut down trees, construct forts, walls, and bridges. The army is not just a fighting force. It is a mobile workforce. The hands that conquered Gaul also paved it. Now about your gear. Your helmet is made of iron, shaped to cover your head, neck, and cheeks. Your armor is a series of metal strips or scales, heavy but flexible. Your shield is curved wood, covered in leather, nearly as tall as you. It's painted with the emblem of your legion, a symbol you swear to protect. You carry a short sword, called a gladius, perfect for stabbing in close combat. Your javelin, the pilum, is designed to bend on impact so the enemy cannot throw it back. Your boots are thick-soled and studded with iron. Good for grip, not so good for comfort. You sleep in your tunic, curled up with your gear. At night, the camp is quiet, but never still. Guards are always posted. Fires are lit. Strange noises echo beyond the walls. Wolves, rustling trees, distant voices. You miss your family. You think of home. But there's no time to dwell on it. Because tomorrow you march again. And if you're unlucky, you fight. Roman battles were brutal. Your formation is tight. Shoulder to shoulder. Shields overlapping. The command is given. You move as one. You are trained not to shout or break ranks. You advance. You stab. You step over fallen men. You don't chase. You don't run. You hold the line. After battle, you clean your gear. Help bury the dead. Repair your tent. No celebration. No medals. If your commander is generous, maybe there's extra wine. But don't expect comfort. Roman soldiers served for 25 years before they could retire. That's 25 years of marching, building, fighting, bleeding. And even retirement is no guarantee of ease. You may receive land in a distant province, far from home. You may settle as a farmer, a stranger in a strange place, surrounded by locals who don't speak Latin. You might become a symbol of Rome's reach. Or just an old man with stiff joints and memories of cold tents and long marches. So when you see those ancient statues of proud legionaries, remember the dust in their mouths, the blisters on their feet, the long nights on guard duty. They were Rome's sword, but they were also its shovel, its hammer, its wall. Now, from this life of orders and iron discipline, we turn to another world entirely. A world far from the front lines. One of silence, ceremony, and strange power. In our next segment, you will meet the Vestal Virgins, sacred, secluded, and entirely controlled. Vestal Virgins, sacred, secluded, controlled. In the heart of Rome, not far from the bustling Forum, there once stood a round temple with a fire that never went out. That fire belonged to Vesta, the Roman goddess of the hearth. And the ones who kept it burning were not priests in golden robes or stern-faced officials. They were young girls. They were called the Vestal Virgins. Imagine yourself as one of them. You are 6 years old. Your parents are proud, nervous, hopeful. Today, you will leave your home and never truly return. You are chosen. Only 6 Vestals serve at a time. The selection is strict. You must be from a noble family. Your body must be unmarked, your mind sharp, your Latin perfect. You are led into the temple by the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of Rome. You take a vow, to serve for 30 years, to live in purity, to keep Vesta's flame alive. You are now separate from the world. No marriage, no family, no personal freedom, but also no father's rule. In Rome, most women live under the legal control of a man, father, husband, or brother. But not the Vestals. They answer only to the gods and to the state. For some, that is freedom. For others, a different kind of prison. You are given white robes, a veil, and a home inside the house of the Vestals, a large, elegant building behind the temple. It has a courtyard, a fountain, private rooms, even gardens. It is quiet. You rise early. Your duties are many. Tending the sacred fire is the most important. It must never go out. If it does, it is a terrible omen. The end of Rome itself, some believe. You also prepare sacred foods, tend offerings, and guard important wills and documents. You are present at major ceremonies. You ride in chariots, honored as a symbol of purity. At festivals, people make way for you. Soldiers lower their weapons. Prisoners touch your robes for luck. You are respected, protected, and watched. You must remain a virgin, not just in body, but in symbol, because you are more than a person now. You are the living flame. If you break your vow, even once, it is considered treason against the gods. The punishment is death. But the Romans will not kill a Vestal by their own hand. Instead, they bury her alive. It happened. Not often, but often enough to remind every girl who wore the white robes that her life was not fully her own. One such case was Cornelia, a Vestal accused of breaking her vow. She swore she was innocent. Still, the sentence was carried out. A small underground chamber was built. She was led there, given a lamp, bread, water, and a blanket. The stone was closed behind her. The people wept. Some say even the gods turned away. But no one stopped it. 30 years is a long time. The first 10 are for learning. You study rituals, memorize prayers, learn the weight of silence. The second 10 you serve fully. You light the fire. You keep the rhythm of Rome. The last 10, you teach the new girls what you were once taught. And then you are free. A rare thing in Rome. A woman who is legally independent. You may marry, though few do. You are given a pension. People greet you with honor. And yet, many former Vestals remain quiet. They live simply, apart. Because how do you return to the world after being its symbol? How do you go shopping when once you blessed emperors? How do you speak freely after 30 years of sacred silence? The Temple of Vesta stood for centuries. The flame was always kept alive. Even when Rome fell, the fire burned for a while longer. But then with time it faded. The gods changed. The temples closed. And the last Vestals walked away. Today their house still stands, its broken walls open to the sky, its gardens wild with weeds. You can walk there now if you visit Rome. And if you stand very still, you may feel the hush of long-ago footsteps on marble floors. The quiet of vows once whispered, and the soft breath of a fire that never wanted to go out. Now, from this world of sacred silence and white veils, we go somewhere far less graceful. We go to the toilets of Rome. Because next, we will discover why Roman toilets were gross group activities. Roman toilets were gross group activities. Let us begin with a simple fact. The Romans were advanced in many ways. They built roads that still exist today. They engineered aqueducts to carry clean water across miles. They constructed enormous public buildings that shaped the skyline of ancient cities. But when it came to toilets, well, you might not want to sit down. Imagine this. You walk into a large stone building. There is no door. The air smells of damp stone, standing water, and something less pleasant beneath that. You hear the trickle of running water, the shuffling of feet, and quiet conversation. You've entered a latrina, a Roman public toilet. And it is busy. Stone benches line the walls. Each bench has evenly spaced holes, about the width of a dinner plate. Underneath the benches, a water channel slowly flows, carrying waste away toward a larger sewer or pit. There are no stalls. No walls between seats. No privacy. People are chatting as they sit. Two men argue about the price of fish. A woman hums as she adjusts her dress. A child climbs onto a bench with help from an older sibling. You find a space and sit. That's how it was. Toilets in ancient Rome were communal. Not just in name, but in practice. Rich and poor alike used them. Not always the same toilets, of course. Wealthier neighborhoods had cleaner ones, sometimes even with mosaics or frescoes. But the idea was the same. Go in, sit down, and do your business beside your neighbors. There was no toilet paper. Instead, Romans used a tersorium, a sponge on a stick. You dip the sponge into a shallow water channel at your feet. Rinse it, use it, rinse it again, and return it to the pot for the next person. It was, in a word, shared. And it wasn't always clean. Even with running water, these facilities could get filthy. Sponges weren't sterilized. The water in the basins could become stagnant. Disease spread easily. In fact, archaeologists have found traces of intestinal parasites in the soil beneath Roman toilets. Worms, eggs, bacteria, all the unwelcome guests of ancient hygiene. And yet, for the Romans, public toilets weren't just practical. They were social spaces. Writers of the time joked about conversations in the latrina. Gossip was shared there. Business deals struck. Jokes told. Sometimes, even poetry was recited while seated. There were no expectations of silence or solitude. It was just another part of daily life. In larger cities like Rome or Ostia, dozens of people might use a single public toilet in an hour. In smaller towns, the latrines were often attached to bathhouses or forums, places where crowds already gathered. Some toilets even had seats warmed by the sun or heated pipes. A few had little decorations, faces carved into the stone, or gods painted on the walls to bring a bit of dignity to the process. But dignity was often in short supply. There was always the risk of vermin. Rats lived in the sewers. Insects hovered. Sometimes even snakes would slither up from below, surprising unfortunate visitors. And then there was the fear of ghosts. Yes, ghosts. Romans believed that certain spirits, especially angry or unclean ones, lingered in dirty, dark places. Toilets were one such place. Protective charms were carved into walls. Tiny figurines were placed beneath benches. Some people muttered spells before sitting down, just in case. In some homes, private toilets were added. These were small, often just a hole over a pot or a shaft. Wealthier houses sometimes had marble seats. But even then, the waste usually just emptied into the street or into poorly maintained drains. To walk a Roman street was to walk carefully. Open sewers flowed along the sides of roads. Chamber pots were emptied from upper windows with little warning. The saying, "watch your step," was very real. So, if you think of the Romans as clean and organized, they were in many ways. But not always in the ways you'd expect. Their hygiene had limits. Their plumbing had problems. Their toilets, while impressive in size and number, were also crowded, smelly, and surprisingly public. And yet they managed. They carried on. They lived and laughed, even while seated side by side. Now, as we step away from the latrina and back into the streets, we notice something strange. A man walks by carrying a bucket. He's heading toward the fullers, the laundry workers. But the bucket is filled with something unexpected. Urine. Because in our next segment, we'll explore the Roman secret to clean clothes and why laundry workers used urine. Why laundry workers used urine. Imagine this. You are walking through a narrow Roman street, early in the day. The air is thick with scents. Warm bread, horse sweat, spices, and something else. Sharp, sour, unmistakable. Urine. You wrinkle your nose and look around. Ahead, a man empties a clay pot into a stone trough. Another follows behind, doing the same. The trough is already half full. They're not emptying chamber pots into the sewer. They're donating, because in ancient Rome, urine was valuable. It was used for cleaning. And not just any cleaning, laundry. Now imagine yourself standing outside a Phalanca. That's what Romans called a laundry workshop. You hear sloshing, stamping, and voices calling out over bubbling vats. You smell something sharp and bitter in the air. Inside, the work has already begun. The fullers, men who work with cloth, are hard at it. One man is waist-deep in a basin, his bare feet stomping rhythmically. Around him, tunics and togas float in the yellowish water. Another worker stirs a bucket, adding more urine. A third hangs clothes to dry under the sun, watching for stains. This is the Roman dry cleaner. And it starts with P. Why? Because urine contains ammonia. And ammonia is a natural cleaner. It breaks down grease and dirt. It helps whiten fabric. To the Romans, it was as essential as soap. In fact, soap existed, but it was rarely used for laundry. It was expensive and better reserved for personal washing. The fullers needed something strong and cheap. Urine was both. To collect it, public urinals, called Phalanca vessels, were placed throughout the city. People relieved themselves into these pots. The contents were then collected by workers and taken to the laundries. It became such an important part of industry that, under Emperor Vespasian, urine was taxed. Yes, taxed. When his son Titus mocked the idea of taxing something so filthy, Vespasian reportedly held a coin under his nose and said, "Money does not stink." That saying, pecunia non olet, is still used today. Inside the Phalanca, the clothes were treated carefully, despite the odd ingredients. After stomping, they might be rinsed in clean water, scrubbed with special earths like fuller's clay, and sometimes bleached using sulfur fumes. The process was labor-intensive and uncomfortable. Workers often stood barefoot in cold, dirty liquid for hours. Their skin burned from the chemicals. Their lungs ached from the vapors. But the job was steady and well-known. Fullers even had their own guilds and patron gods. Some Phalancae were large businesses. In Pompeii, several have been found, with signs, storage rooms, and spacious yards for drying. One of the most famous belonged to a man named Stephanus. His shop had a decorated entrance and even graffiti advertising his services. The finished clothes were neatly folded, pressed with heated irons, and sometimes perfumed. The rich demanded fresh togas. The poor made do with simpler tunics. But all turned to the fullers for clean garments. And the fullers turned to the public for urine. Imagine walking through the street carrying your laundry. You nod at the man dumping his donation. You pass the shop and smell the mix of wool, vinegar, and ammonia. You hand over your stained tunic and know that, in a few days, it will return clean. Even if the cleaning method makes your stomach turn. But you don't complain, because this is normal. This is Rome, a city where beauty was built on strange things, where dazzling white robes came from dirty work, where even your bathhouse towel might owe its softness to someone else's bladder. There's something almost poetic in it. The highest, most elegant Roman fashion, all washed in the humblest fluid. And speaking of humble, in our next segment, we'll leave the laundry shop behind and step into the worn sandals of someone far less lucky. Because next, we discover what it meant to be a Roman child, and what Roman children had to endure. What Roman children had to endure. In modern times, childhood is often imagined as a time of play, learning, and protection. But in ancient Rome, childhood was short, and not always kind. Imagine yourself as a Roman child. You are 5 years old. If you've survived this long, you are lucky. Many children do not. Roman infant mortality was high. Diseases spread easily. Medicine was limited. Clean water was hard to find. Doctors existed, but not for everyone. Many families lost one or more children before they reached age 10. You were given a name, but not always right away. In some households, babies were not officially accepted until the 8th or 9th day, during a ceremony called the dies lustricus, the day of purification. Until then, the baby was not fully part of the family. Some were abandoned, especially if they were born weak, deformed, or simply at the wrong time. Infants might be left on hillsides or outside temples. Some were rescued and raised as slaves. But you survived, and now your daily life begins. If you are a boy from a wealthy family, you will be educated. A tutor may come to your home, or you may walk with other boys to the local ludus, the Roman school. Your teacher is called a literator. He carries a stick. You will learn to read, write, and do basic math. Lessons are often memorized by repetition. Mistakes are punished with sharp words, or worse, a switch across the palm. You use a wax tablet and a wooden stylus. Your letters are shaky. Your hand gets sore. You practice writing lines over and over again. Roma est in Italia. Rome is in Italy. Again and again. If you do well, you may go on to learn Greek, history, and rhetoric. You may become a lawyer, a senator, or a scholar. If you are poor, schooling is unlikely. Instead, you learn your family's trade. You follow your father to the fields, the shop, or the docks. You learn to shape leather, carry buckets, or pound grain. Your small hands are useful in tight spaces. Your back aches at night. If you are a girl, things are different. School is rare. A few girls learn to read and write, especially in rich homes, but most are trained in household tasks from a young age. You learn to weave, cook, clean, and carry water. You help raise younger siblings. You stay close to home. From the time you are 10 or 11, you hear whispers about marriage. Many girls were married by age 12 or 13, some even younger. A husband might be twice your age. You do not choose him. He is chosen for you. Marriage is a contract, not a romance. It joins families. It brings dowries. It builds status. You are expected to be modest, obedient, and fertile. You may never go to school. You may never own property. You may never speak freely in court. But even within these limits, Roman children could find joy. There were toys, small dolls made of bone or cloth, miniature carts, carved animals, and little dice made of ivory. Children played games in courtyards and streets. They skipped stones, played tag, and spun tops. Boys made pretend battles with sticks. Girls made tiny houses from pebbles. Some children kept pet birds, caged sparrows singing finches. Some had monkeys, even dogs. They sang simple songs, told stories, danced. Festivals brought sweets and colored ribbons. The Saturnalia, a winter celebration, let children wear silly hats and mock their elders. For a few days, even slaves were allowed to joke with their masters. Some Roman families genuinely cared for their children. Tombstones bear tender messages. To our sweet little daughter, taken too soon. To my dear son, the joy of my life. Parents grieved. They remembered birthdays. They kept tiny shoes and locks of hair. But childhood still ended early. By the age of 14, most Roman boys were seen as men. They put aside the bulla, a protective charm worn since birth, and donned the toga of adulthood. Girls were married. Boys were apprenticed. Life pressed forward. There was little time for hesitation. No teenage years as we know them. No safety nets. You were either protected or you weren't. Educated or ignored. Cherished or expendable. Yet through it all, Roman children laughed. They dreamed. They found moments of happiness in broken streets and crowded rooms. And now we leave this young world behind. We walk to a wide, quiet river. And we watch as a man in a red cloak stops at its edge and looks northward. In our next segment, we stand with Julius Caesar at the Rubicon and watch as everything begins to change. Crossing the Rubicon, Caesar's point of no return. The year is 49 BCE. The Republic is old now, worn at the edges. Cracks run through the Senate. Factions argue. Armies no longer belong to the state. They belong to generals, to powerful men. And one of those men is Gaius Julius Caesar. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet camp near the river Rubicon. It's just before dawn. The soldiers around you are restless. They whisper in low tones. Some adjust their gear. Others stare into the trees. You hear a horse approach. It's Caesar. He wears a red cloak. His face is calm, but you can feel the weight in his eyes. He dismounts, walks to the river, and stands in silence. He knows what this means. The Rubicon marks the boundary between Cisalpine Gaul, where Caesar is governor, and Italy proper, controlled directly by the Roman Senate. Roman law is clear. A general cannot bring his army into Italy. Not without permission. Not without giving up his command. To do so is treason. A declaration of war. But Caesar has enemies in Rome. The Senate, led by his rival Pompey, has ordered him to disband his army and return to the city as a private citizen. He knows what that means: trial, humiliation, possibly death. He must choose. Obey or defy. You watch as Caesar turns to his men. His voice is steady. He speaks of loyalty, of duty, of betrayal by those in power. He says he has no choice but to protect the Republic, his republic. Then, without ceremony, he steps into the water, the Rubicon, and his army follows. There is no battle that day, no blood in the river, but a line has been crossed. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" will echo for centuries, because once he does it, there's no turning back. He marches south. City after city opens its gates. Some welcome him. Others flee. Pompey and the Senate abandon Rome and escape to Greece. Caesar enters the capital without resistance. Not as a conqueror, but as a man claiming what he believes is his. The war that follows is long and brutal. Caesar fights in Greece, then Egypt, then Spain. He wins again and again. He is brilliant, daring, and often ruthless. At times, his mercy surprises even his enemies. At others, his punishments chill his allies. But in the end, he wins. He becomes dictator for life. Rome celebrates. Coins are struck with his face. Statues are raised. A month is renamed in his honor, Julius or July. But not everyone is pleased. The Republic is supposed to be ruled by law, not by one man. Some senators fear he is becoming a king in all but name. They see power slipping away. And so they make a plan. But that's a story for another day. Today, we sit with that quiet moment at the Rubicon. A narrow stream. A cold morning. A single man stepping into the water, knowing that his life and his world will never be the same. And as we leave this moment of decision behind, we walk with someone else, someone less powerful, less remembered, but just as human. In our next segment, you are no longer Caesar. You are the one sent away, because you've been banished. And it's not fun. You've been banished, and it's not fun. Imagine you are a Roman citizen. You once had a house, friends, a favorite tavern, a place at the baths, a rhythm to your life. And now it's all gone. Because today, a man in a toga read your name aloud in the forum. And after that, you were told to leave Rome. To leave Italy. To leave everything you know. You have been exiled, or as the Romans called it, exilium. You have a few hours to pack. You may take only what you can carry. And once you cross the edge of Italy, you may never return. The punishment is serious, but it isn't always for serious crimes. You might have spoken too freely, offended the wrong person, published a poem someone didn't like, taken the wrong side in a political fight. It happened to Ovid, one of Rome's most famous poets. He wrote elegant verses, loved by the people, and then he was gone. Sent to the edge of the empire, to a cold town by the Black Sea. Why? He called it a poem and a mistake. The real reason remains a mystery. But once you're banished, the details hardly matter. You are told where you can go. You are not allowed to choose. You might be sent to a far province, perhaps a lonely island, or a backwater town surrounded by strangers. No family, no comforts, no protection. There is no trial, no appeal. Once you are gone, you are meant to be forgotten. Imagine boarding a small ship. Your luggage is light. Your eyes sting from salt and wind. You look back once, hoping for a last glimpse of the city. But the coast is already fading. Your stomach turns, not just from the sea, but from fear. Where will you sleep? Who will speak your language? How will you survive? If you are wealthy, you might still live decently. But even then, you will miss the familiar streets, the taste of Roman bread, the sound of Latin in the marketplace. If you are poor, exile is harder. You must rely on strangers. Work for scraps. Wait for letters that may never arrive. There is no internet. No phone. No way to be sure your family even remembers you. Some exiles were allowed to write. They begged the Senate for mercy. They sent poems, essays, letters full of longing and shame. Ovid in exile wrote Tristia, a book of sorrowful poems. He described the cold, the fear, the silence of being unwanted. He said the winters bit like wolves. He said the nights were endless. He said Rome, once full of joy, now haunted his dreams. Exile wasn't always permanent. Sometimes, if your allies gained power, you could be recalled. If your enemy fell, you might return. But even then, home would never feel the same. Your garden might be overgrown. Your neighbors might not remember you. The world would have moved on without you, and you would be a ghost in your own city. Other times, exile was simply a slow, quiet end. You live out your days in a distant corner of the empire, telling stories to people who don't know your name or don't care. Perhaps you teach. Perhaps you grow vegetables. Perhaps you just sit and remember. Banished. Forgotten. Waiting for a letter that never comes. And so, as you watch the sunset over unfamiliar hills, you wonder, what was your mistake? Did you truly deserve this? Or were you just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Now, as we leave the lonely road of exile, the city lights seem far away. But there is life in Rome still, and it does not sleep. Because in our next segment, we slip into the shadows and follow the torchlight. We are heading into ancient Roman nightlife. And you'd better watch your purse. Ancient Roman nightlife, watch your purse. The sun has set over the 7 hills. Shadows stretch long across the cobbled streets. The air cools slightly, though it still carries the scent of the day, baked stone, hot oil, and people pressed too closely together. Rome never truly sleeps. Not even at night. Imagine yourself stepping out into the Roman street just after twilight. You wrap your cloak tighter. A small oil lamp burns in your hand, flickering gently as you walk. There are no streetlights here, only what people carry. Or the pale light of the moon, if you're lucky. The main roads are still lively. Merchants call from food stalls. Young men drink and laugh. Musicians pluck strings in front of taverns. The aroma of roasted chickpeas and fried fish drifts from open windows. It feels festive. Loud. A little reckless. But don't let that fool you. The streets of Rome are dangerous after dark. If you are rich, you don't walk at night. You're carried, perhaps in a litter with curtains drawn, escorted by bodyguards. If you are poor or unlucky, you walk. And you walk fast. Why? Because thieves come out at night. They wait in alleys, behind market stalls, in dark corners of the Suburra, the crowded, low-lying part of Rome where buildings lean together and everything smells damp. They're not after your life. They want your coin pouch, your sandals, your belt buckle, your ring. Some carry blades. Others work in pairs. One distracts, the other lifts your purse. Before you notice, they've vanished into the crowd. Roman poets warned readers, don't carry more than you need. Tie your money tight. Keep your eyes open. Even police, the cohorts urbani, rarely patrol the worst areas. And if they do, they arrive late and leave early. But not all of Rome at night is crime and fear. There are pleasures, too. You pass by a tavern or capona, a smoky little room with low tables and clay cups. Inside, men drink watered wine. Dice clatter on wood. A singer hums something slow and sad. Next door, a popina, a kind of snack bar, serves warm pulses, cheese, olives, and cheap wine. Students argue about philosophy. Soldiers boast about past campaigns. In some corners, private parties are just beginning. The rich host convivia, evening banquets with couches instead of chairs. Guests lie on one side, eat with their fingers, sip wine, and talk until midnight. They tell jokes. They flirt. They debate politics with full mouths. In wealthier homes, lanterns line the walkways. Slaves move quietly with pitchers and trays. A musician may play a lyre. A poet might recite verses. If the mood sours, someone might be asked to leave. Or someone might be challenged to a duel, though these are rare and usually more about pride than danger. Elsewhere, the streets become strange. You see masked performers pretending to be gods or spirits. Street magicians, beggars with strange stories. Prostitutes leaning against doorways, calling softly to passers-by. Some wear elaborate wigs. Others speak Greek or sing songs from Egypt. They work quietly, carefully, sometimes for coin, sometimes for protection. In the back alleys, you might even find a gambling den hidden behind a curtain. Illegal, but not unusual. Dice games are common. You hear cheers and groans, and always the rattle of bone dice on stone. But your lamp is running low now. And even if you're careful, the city begins to feel heavier as the hours pass. The singing fades. The stalls close. The laughter thins out. And those who remain are not the sort you want to meet in the dark. It is said that the gods themselves retreat after midnight. Even they do not walk the streets at that hour. So you return home. Or to your friend's step. Or perhaps, if you're a traveler, to the corner of an insula's stairwell, sleeping with your back to the wall and your coin pouch under your head. You've made it through the night, but many did not. And as the first pale glow of dawn returns to the sky, Rome slowly awakens again. Tomorrow, the noise will return. The forum will fill. The baths will steam. But for now, the city yawns in silence. And as the sun rises, it lights not just the roofs and roads above ground, but something far deeper, far stranger. Because next, we descend beneath the city into its underground temples. And we'll explore the secret, silent world of Rome's Mithraic cults. Rome's underground Mithraic temples. Imagine yourself walking down a narrow stone stairway. The walls are damp. The air grows cooler with each step. Behind you, the city still buzzes faintly, but ahead there is silence. You carry a small oil lamp. Its soft flame flickers, casting long shadows on the walls. And then you arrive. You are in a Mithraeum, a temple to the god Mithras. It is not grand. It is not open to the public. It is small, narrow, and low-ceilinged. Like a cave. In fact, many Mithraea were built underground on purpose. Some were carved from existing caves. Others were buried beneath temples, bathhouses, or apartment buildings. They were secret. They were meant to feel hidden. You are not here by accident. You are one of the initiates. The cult of Mithras was popular among Roman soldiers and merchants, especially during the first few centuries CE. It was a mystery religion, meaning its practices were kept secret from outsiders. No public ceremonies. No grand temples on hilltops. Only these quiet, hidden places. Look around. On either side of the room are low stone benches, where worshippers sit or lie during rituals. At the far end is a carved relief, a central image of Mithras himself. He is young, strong, wearing a pointed Phrygian cap, and he is killing a bull. This image, called the Tauroctony, is found in almost every Mithraeum. Mithras grasps the bull by the nostrils and plunges a dagger into its neck. Around them, other creatures gather, a dog, a snake, a scorpion, even a raven. Above, the sun and moon watch silently. What does it mean? No one can say for sure. The cult left no sacred texts. Most of what we know comes from archaeology. Some scholars believe the image represents life, death, and rebirth. The bull's blood may symbolize the renewal of nature. Others see it as a celestial map, a reference to stars and zodiac signs. To the followers of Mithras, it was sacred, but not something to be explained. It was to be experienced. Initiation into the cult was complex. You didn't simply join. You passed through 7 levels, each with a name and a meaning. Raven, bridegroom, soldier, lion, Persian, courier of the Sun Father. Each stage involved rituals, tests, and symbols. Some involved silence. Some involved fasting. Others may have required standing in water or passing through smoke. At the highest levels, you were considered spiritually reborn. We do not know all the details. That was the point. What happened in the Mithraeum stayed in the Mithraeum. Meals were shared there, simple ones of bread and wine. Lamps were lit. Prayers spoken in low voices. Some temples had skylights that aligned with the sun on certain days, casting light directly onto Mithras' image. It was a place of symbolism, a place of male fellowship. Women were not allowed in the cult. It was a brotherhood, perhaps appealing to soldiers far from home, longing for purpose, structure, and secret strength. Mithras was not Roman originally. His roots stretch back to Persia, where an earlier version of the god was worshipped. But the Roman Mithras was different. He evolved. He adapted to Roman tastes, Roman values. Discipline, loyalty, victory. The cult grew. By the 2nd century, Mithraeums could be found from Britain to Syria, from the Danube to North Africa. In Rome alone, over 30 have been discovered. But then it faded. As Christianity rose, the old cults declined. By the 4th century, many Mithraeums were abandoned. Some were destroyed. Others were sealed beneath churches or buried under rubble. Today they remain. If you visit Rome, you can still descend into a Mithraeum. One of the most famous lies beneath the Church of San Clemente. Beneath the altar, beneath the brickwork, beneath even the early Christian frescoes, you'll find it. A chamber of stone, carved benches, a faded image of Mithras slaying the bull. Silent for centuries, but once filled with the breath of men chanting in the dark. And so we leave the secret world of Mithras behind. But we are not done with the baths. Next, we walk into a palace of steam and marble. Vast, beautiful, imposing. We are going to the baths of Caracalla. And there, we'll discover a place of luxury, built on hardship. The baths of Caracalla, beauty with a dark side. It is a warm afternoon in ancient Rome. You walk down a wide marble path, past olive trees and low walls covered in creeping ivy. Ahead rises a structure so vast it seems to touch the sky. Columns stretch high above your head. The stones are smooth and white. This is the baths of Caracalla, or Thermae Antoniniani, as they were known in the time of the emperors. A palace of public bathing. Free to enter. Open to citizens. And utterly massive. The Emperor Caracalla ordered them built in the early 3rd century CE. And like many emperors, he wanted something big, bold, and impressive. He got his wish. The baths covered over 30 acres. They could hold thousands of people at once. And the complex wasn't just for bathing. There were libraries, exercise yards, gardens, shops, fountains, and lecture halls. It was a social hub. A place to relax, to talk, to be seen. But to enjoy it, you didn't need wealth. You needed time. The baths were part of daily life for many Romans. First, you might start in the palestra, the open-air exercise yard. You stretch. You lift weights. You wrestle. You sweat beneath the sun. Then, dusty and tired, you move inside. The first room is the apoditerium, the changing room. You undress. A slave takes your sandals and tunic. You hope they'll be there when you return. Next, the tepidarium, the warm room. The air is moist. The stone benches are heated from below. Your body begins to relax. Then the caldarium, the hot room. Steam rises. Sweat beads on your forehead. You sit beside others, strangers and friends, wrapped in silence or quiet talk. Finally, the frigidarium, the cold pool. You plunge in. The shock is sharp, but it clears your mind. Your skin tingles. You feel reborn. All of this free of charge. Thanks to the state. Thanks to the emperor. But the beauty comes at a cost. To build these baths, thousands of laborers worked for years. Stones were hauled from distant quarries. Bricks were fired in huge kilns. Water was piped in from miles away via aqueducts. Slaves dug foundations, mixed concrete, lifted beams, cut marble. And once the baths opened, more workers kept them running. Furnaces burned day and night to heat the water. Slaves stoked fires, cleaned floors, fetched towels. Someone had to manage the flow of water. Someone had to polish the brass. Someone had to remove the waste. The luxury of the many rested on the backs of the few. And yet, to the average Roman citizen, the baths were a gift. A place where class blurred. Senators and beggars might share the same room, soak in the same pool. Of course, not everyone bathed at the same time. Men and women usually bathed separately, sometimes at different hours, sometimes in different wings. But there were exceptions. Some emperors allowed mixed bathing. Others banned it. And while the water was often changed, hygiene wasn't always perfect. Illness still spread. Foot fungus, eye infections, skin conditions. Soap was rare. Instead, bathers used strigils, curved metal scrapers, to remove oil and sweat from their skin. These were wiped on towels or flicked onto the floor. Still, the baths were a place of peace, of routine, of community. People met there daily, read scrolls, shared news, discussed politics, made business deals. Children splashed in shallow pools. Elderly men sat in the warm air, sighing gently. And all around them, marble mosaics, painted ceilings, statues of gods and heroes. A palace for the public. But in time, it too faded. As the empire weakened, maintenance became harder. The aqueducts broke. The furnaces went cold. The walls crumbled. Today the ruins still stand. Silent. Massive. Grass grows between the stones. Birds nest in the archways. And yet, if you listen closely, you might still hear the splash of water, the scrape of a strigil, the low murmur of Roman voices rising with the steam. And now, as we dry our feet and step back into the sunlight, we prepare for a different kind of Roman experience. Not luxury, not beauty, but pain. Because next, we sit in a wooden chair, open our mouth, and hope for the best. We are going to the dentist. And Roman dentistry was a horror show. Why Roman dentistry was a horror show? Imagine yourself sitting on a low stool in a Roman marketplace. The sun is hot, the ground is dusty, and your mouth is aching. Your tooth has throbbed for days. You've tried rinsing with vinegar, chewing mint leaves, even praying to Apollo, the god of healing. Nothing has helped. So here you are, in front of a wooden table covered in tools. None of them look clean. Most of them look like they were made for carpentry, not dentistry. Hooks, clamps, iron pliers, and long needles. The man who greets you is not wearing white. He is not a doctor in the way we know today. He might be a barber, a street healer, a traveling merchant who learned a little of everything and a lot of nothing. But he says he can help. And at this point you believe him. There is no anesthesia, no numbing agent, no comfortable chair or relaxing music. You sit on a stool. He tells you to open wide. He leans in with a pair of iron tongs, heating them first in a brazier, either to soften the metal or, perhaps, as a crude way to disinfect. Then he grips the tooth and pulls. Hard. No counting down. No gentle voice. Just pressure, pain, and the metallic taste of blood. If the tooth comes out cleanly, you are lucky. If it breaks, he tries again. And again. Sometimes he leaves part of it behind. Sometimes more damage is done than fixed. Because Roman dentistry was not a science. It was guesswork. Tooth decay was common. Romans loved sweet wine, dried fruits, honey cakes, sugar in disguise. And though some used toothpicks or even early toothbrushes made from frayed twigs, dental hygiene was poor. There was no toothpaste as we know it. Instead, some people cleaned their teeth with powders, ashes of goat hooves, crushed eggshells, or even charcoal. Others rinsed with urine, believing it helped whiten enamel. The ammonia in urine did have some cleaning effect, but at a rather unpleasant cost. Toothaches were serious and dangerous. Infections could spread. A rotting tooth might cause fever, swelling, and even death if it reached the bloodstream. There were attempts at fillings, but rarely successful ones. Archaeologists have found skulls with gold wires used to hold loose teeth in place, or threads of linen tied around painful molars. Some tried drilling small holes to relieve pressure from an abscess. With no anesthesia. Imagine sitting still through that. But some Romans sought more than pain relief. They wanted cosmetic improvement. Roman elites valued white, even teeth. Some women painted theirs with powder made from crushed bones or marble dust. Others rubbed their gums with myrrh to improve smell. Dentistry, in this case, became more about status than health. And yet, even with the tools and treatments available, most Romans simply endured. A toothache was part of life. Something to suffer through until it passed, or until it became too much to bear. We know this from Roman texts. Pliny the Elder wrote about herbal remedies, chewing bark, burning certain roots. Scribonius Largus, a Roman physician, offered pain relief recipes using vinegar and herbs. But nothing truly worked. Even the rich weren't safe. And the poor had no options at all. So imagine now rising from that stool. Your tooth is gone. Your jaw is swollen. Your ears ring. But the pain is quieter. You hand over a few coins. The dentist wipes his hands on his tunic and turns to the next person in line. And you? You head home with an empty space where your tooth once was. And perhaps a silent vow never to return. But not all things lost in Rome were so small. In our next segment, we follow the trail of something much bigger, an entire Roman legion. Because next, we explore the mystery of the lost ninth. Let us now turn from pain beneath a Roman roof to something much larger. Something whispered about in distant forts and faraway provinces. We are leaving the streets of the city behind and stepping into legend. Because now we seek the truth about the lost legion of the ninth. Imagine yourself as a Roman soldier. The year is sometime in the early 2nd century CE. You wear a short tunic beneath your armor, thick-soled sandals on your feet, and a helmet crested with horsehair. You carry a gladius, a short sword, and a rectangular shield. You serve in the Legio IX Hispana, the Ninth Legion. Your banner shows a bull, the sacred animal of your legion. You've marched under that banner through deserts, forests, and across mountains. You've built forts, dug ditches, watched rivers and guarded roads. The Ninth has a long history. It was one of Julius Caesar's legions. It fought in Gaul. It crushed revolts in Hispania. It marched with Augustus. And now it is stationed far from Rome, in Britannia, the edges of the known world. Gray skies, cold rain, thick forests, strange gods, fierce tribes. The Roman hold on Britain is not strong. There are uprisings, rebellions, angry chieftains who resist Roman rule. And then suddenly the Ninth disappears. Not all at once, but slowly, and then completely. There is no single record of its destruction, no official account, no funeral, no great battle carved into marble. It simply vanishes from the lists. Its name disappears from inscriptions. Its emblem stops appearing on buildings. Its officers are never heard from again. What happened? Some believe the Ninth was destroyed in a brutal uprising, perhaps during a northern campaign in what is now Scotland. Imagine a march into the mist. The Legion moves north from their base at Eboracum, modern-day York. The hills rise. The paths grow narrow. The locals vanish into the trees. Drums beat in the distance. Torches flicker in the fog. And then nothing. No survivors. No letters. No return. Others suggest they were transferred east to the Rhine or to the Danube and wiped out there in later campaigns. Still others argue that the Legion was quietly disbanded, perhaps after suffering heavy losses, and its memory faded in shame. But even in silence, the Ninth left clues. In York, archaeologists found tiles stamped with Leg 9 Hisp and remnants of barracks. In Nijmegen, in the Netherlands, some evidence suggests part of the Legion may have ended up there, briefly. But the trail grows cold, and the mystery remains. In later centuries, the legend grew. Writers imagine the Legion lost in the wild north, swallowed by storm and spear. In modern novels and films, they are remembered as brave men betrayed, left to die beyond the wall. There is no proof, but there is also no denial. The Ninth is gone. Somewhere in the forests of Britain or the battlefields of the East, their bones lie buried, and their silence echoes louder than their banners ever did. For Rome, a missing legion was rare, but not impossible. And for the soldiers of the Ninth, their story, whatever it truly was, became one of Rome's greatest unsolved disappearances. So now we leave the misty hills behind and return to the city. Because in the next segment, we do not follow a lost legion. We follow a very busy man. You are about to live a day in the sandals of Julius Caesar. And he was not the type to sleep in. Let us now rise before the sun, stretch our limbs beneath a woolen blanket, and begin a day in the life of one of the most famous men in all of Roman history. This is not a day of rest. This is a day in the life of Julius Caesar. And yes, he was very, very busy. It is still dark in Rome. The city sleeps beneath soft layers of silence. Oil lamps flicker in distant windows. Dogs bark once, then fall quiet. You are already awake, because you are Gaius Julius Caesar. Your bed is modest, not too soft. You prefer it that way. You rise early, before the sun, and begin your work immediately. There is no time to waste. The first part of your day begins in near silence. You read letters, dictate responses, review scrolls from across the empire, military reports, requests for favors, updates from the provinces. As you speak, a scribe writes furiously, trying to keep up. Caesar is famous for his speed, in thought, in action, in speech. Some say he can dictate multiple letters at once, switching topics mid-sentence, while keeping each message perfectly clear. By dawn, you're already 2 hours ahead of everyone else. You take a light breakfast, bread, cheese, perhaps a few dates. Wine is sipped, not gulped. Your mind is already planning meetings, memorizing names, counting debts, recalling insults. Soon, clients begin to arrive. This is the salutatio, the morning greeting. Dozens of men come to your home. Some are important. Some are hopeful. All want something. They bring requests, favors, protection, recommendations. You greet them calmly, efficiently. Politics in Rome is personal. These small morning meetings build your network, your power. And then business. You dress in a toga, crisp and white. Your sandals are polished. You wear a laurel wreath on special occasions, but not today. With your entourage in tow, you make your way toward the forum. The streets are crowded now. Vendors shout. Coins jingle. Smells of frying oil and damp will fill the air. As you walk, people watch. You nod occasionally. Smile rarely. Your presence is enough. At the Forum, the heart of Roman life, you attend Senate meetings. You argue, persuade, and sometimes simply listen. You know when to speak and when to be silent. Today's agenda might include grain prices, court appointments, or debates about land for veterans. But underneath every topic lies something more: power. You've built yours carefully, through charm, ambition, and calculated risks. You've been a general, a consul, a reformer. Now you are dictator for life. But that doesn't mean your days are easy. In fact, it means you're watched more closely than ever. After public business, you visit the baths. It's part relaxation, part performance. Here, among marble columns and hot steam, men discuss alliances, gossip, and policy. You listen, laugh politely, and make promises that you may or may not intend to keep. Next, lunch. It is modest. Roman lunch is rarely extravagant. You eat quickly, perhaps in the company of scholars or poets. You are known to enjoy witty conversation, and you've surrounded yourself with clever minds. Afternoons are spent on justice. As dictator, you are expected to oversee cases, settle disputes, hear complaints. Your judgments are swift. You dislike hesitation. You may also spend time reviewing building projects. You are transforming Rome. New temples, new forums, new roads. Stone is power, and you intend to leave your mark. Evenings bring dinners. Sometimes private, sometimes public. At these meals, Caesar is charming but guarded. You drink sparingly. You observe. You understand that loyalty is fragile and ambition sharp. You've forgiven enemies before, but you never forget them. And finally, you return home. It is late now, but even before you remove your sandals, a scribe approaches with new scrolls. You read. You dictate. You prepare for tomorrow, because your mind never truly sleeps. And perhaps, on this particular night, you feel a strange unease. You've recently been warned. People murmur. Friends hesitate. But you wave it off. You are Caesar. You are careful. You are surrounded by guards. You are beloved by the people. And yet, history remembers what comes next. But before we reach that end, we shift our gaze once again, from the high towers of power to the quiet corners of everyday life. Because in our next segment, we walk in the sandals of a Roman woman. And her life is not one of power. It is one of marriage and misery. Let us now leave the Senate House and the marble halls, and turn our attention to the quieter, often hidden side of Roman life. You are no longer a statesman or a soldier. You are a woman in ancient Rome. And your path is not lined with power, but with expectations. With duty. With silence. Imagine you are born into a Roman family. You are not the heir. You are not expected to join the army, run for office, or own land in your name. You are a daughter, a Roman puella. Your future has already been decided. From the moment you learn to speak, you are told to be modest, to be quiet, to be obedient. Your father, known as the paterfamilias, holds all legal power over you. He can decide who you marry, when, and to whom. You do not get to choose. Marriage comes early, sometimes as young as 12. If your father is kind, he may wait until you are 14 or 15, but not much later. Marriage is not about love. It is about alliances. Your husband may be twice your age. He may be a stranger. He may already have children. Once married, you move into his household. You are expected to bear children, keep the home, supervise the slaves, and above all, stay loyal. You are now under his control, but even then not fully free, because Roman marriage is strange. In some cases, you remain legally tied to your father, even as you live with your husband. In others, you pass into your husband's legal family and become part of his lineage. Either way, your body and your choices are not your own. You cannot vote. You cannot run for office. You may inherit property, yes, but someone else will manage it. And if you speak too freely, if you are too clever, too bold, people whisper. Roman men liked clever women, as long as they stayed in the background. So you learn to navigate the world quietly, through subtle gestures, quiet words, careful alliances. Some women do find power. They influence their husbands behind closed doors. They arrange matches. They manage estates. A few become famous: Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus; Agrippina, mother of Nero; Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers. But these are exceptions. For most women, life is narrow. There is a Latin word, lanificium. It means wool spinning. and for centuries it was the symbol of a good Roman wife. Quiet, domestic, industrious, invisible. You spin wool. You raise children. You smile politely at your husband's guests. That is your role. But life is not always so still. Pregnancy is frequent and dangerous. There are no antibiotics, no surgical interventions. A difficult birth can easily become fatal. Infants often die. Mothers too. You may have 10 children and lose 6. Grief is common, worn like a veil. And if your husband dies or divorces you, and Roman men could divorce without much reason, you may return to your father's home. Or, if you're wealthy, manage your own. But always, you live in the shadow of others' decisions. Yet women found ways to shape their world. Some ran businesses, bakeries, bathhouses, taverns. Some became midwives or healers. Others joined religious orders like the Vestal Virgins, who held power and respect in exchange for total obedience and chastity. There were poets too. One named Sulpicia wrote about love and longing, short verses that survive today. "I hate to write these lines without you," she wrote to a lover. "But I do, and I wait." There is a quiet strength in Roman women. In their letters, their tomb inscriptions, their careful planning, even their curses, etched onto lead tablets and hidden in wells. They could not always speak openly, but they spoke, and we hear them still. So now we leave behind the spinning rooms and shadowed courtyards. In our next segment, we walk into the roaring heart of the empire's entertainment machine. You know, the Colosseum. But have you ever wondered who kept it running? Next, we meet the forgotten workers of the arena. The Colosseum's forgotten workers. The sun rises over Rome, and already the crowds are forming. The day is warm. There's the sharp smell of dust and animal dung in the air. You walk down a wide stone road toward the Colosseum, the Flavian amphitheater, and you hear it before you see it. The low hum of voices, the clatter of sandals, the occasional roar from something caged. But you are not here to watch. You are here to work. You are one of the hundreds, perhaps thousands, of invisible hands behind the grand Roman games. Workers like you are essential, but easily forgotten. The games are free to attend. Seats are assigned by class. Senators up front, women and slaves high above. But none of it happens without you and your fellow laborers. As a worker, your job begins well before the gates open. Some people think the Colosseum was only about gladiators, but it was more complex than that. There were stagehands, carpenters, sweepers, animal handlers, cooks, water carriers, scaffold builders, rope haulers, and more. Slaves and freedmen made up much of the workforce. And everything had to run smoothly. You sweep the walkways, rub oil into the wooden benches, check the trapdoors below the arena floor. Because beneath the sand, there is an entire underground world, the hypogeum. You climb down a wooden ladder into the shadowed corridors below. It's dim, cramped. The air smells of sweat and wood smoke. There are elevators here, primitive but ingenious, powered by teams of workers pulling ropes, turning winches, lifting cages from the depths to the arena floor. You help guide a cage into place. Inside is a leopard pacing nervously. Its eyes reflect torchlight. It snarls once, and you step back. You say a quiet prayer to no one in particular and check the ropes again. Elsewhere, workers prepare props for elaborate reenactments. Mock naval battles, mythical dramas, executions dressed as scenes from myth. Costumes are sewn. Fake trees and painted scenery are hoisted into place. It's not art, it's entertainment, and everything must be timed exactly. When the crowd is seated and the horn blows, your real work begins. You are behind the walls, below the floors, watching levers and doors, hauling ropes, keeping the machinery of death and drama moving without pause. Sometimes animals escape. Sometimes a pulley breaks. Sometimes you hear things you don't want to hear. But you keep working, because your life depends on it. You may be a slave, assigned to the Colosseum by your master. Or perhaps a freedman, trying to earn a living in the only way available to you. Some workers even live in the structure, sleeping under the stairs in stone alcoves surrounded by tools and sawdust. The Colosseum is a city within a city, and its engines never truly stop. Later in the day, blood is cleaned from the sand. You help break it smooth. Animal remains are hauled out on carts. Smashed props are replaced. Splintered doors are mended. You work through the heat, through the noise, through the danger. By evening, your limbs ache. Your back is stiff. But the day is not over. There are always more games to prepare. Tomorrow may bring an elephant, or a famous gladiator, or a public execution? You don't know. You just keep working. And while tens of thousands cheer, shout, or gasp above you, down here, below the marble and the awnings, you move in silence. Because the Colosseum is not just a monument. It is a machine. And every machine has those who polish it, power it, and disappear into its shadows. So now, we leave the arena's dark corridors and climb back into the light. And next, we step off land entirely. You are about to board a Roman ship. And not the kind fit for emperors. This is a creaky, leaky, wind-beaten transport. Because next, you are a Roman sailor. And the sea is not kind. Being a Roman sailor in a leaky ship. Imagine the scent of fish, wet rope, and old wood. Your tunic is already damp, your sandals worn thin. The harbor at Ostia, Rome's main port, is alive with movement. Slaves loading amphorae of olive oil, wine, grain, and salted fish onto ships bound for the corners of the empire. You are part of a merchant crew, one of many working to keep Rome fed, fueled, and functioning. Your vessel is not large, not sleek. It's a wide, squat freighter, built for cargo, not comfort. Its planks creak when you shift your weight. The sails are patched. The ropes have been knotted so many times they barely bend. There is no below-deck sleeping area. No kitchen. No toilet. No privacy. You live on the deck, under the open sky, and you sleep wherever there is space not taken up by sacks of grain or crates of pottery. You rise with the sun and start your work. Sails must be trimmed and repaired. Oars inspected. Barrels tied down. Every journey is a test, not just of skill, but of luck. Roman sailors fear storms more than pirates. Roman ships had no compass. Navigation was done by the stars, by the shape of the coastline, or by following well-known sea routes. But when clouds roll in, and the sea turns black, all of that becomes useless. You've heard stories of ships disappearing without a trace, of vessels smashed against rocky coasts near Sicily, North Africa, or the Aegean Islands. Some say the gods are angry. Others just nod grimly and tie another rope. There are no life vests, no lifeboats. If your ship goes down, you swim, or you sink. And many of your fellow sailors cannot swim at all. Your diet is simple. Flatbread, dried beans, salted pork or fish when available. You drink rainwater, or whatever water was stored in barrels, often stale, sometimes sour. And you work, endlessly, hauling anchors, scrubbing deck boards, lowering sails, raising sails, adjusting ropes, and shouting to be heard over the wind. Your hands are always blistered, your back always stiff. And the pay? Enough to survive if nothing goes wrong. But something always goes wrong. If you make it to port in Alexandria, or Antioch, or Massilia, you might get one day of rest. A jug of wine, a soft bed if you're lucky. Then the cargo is unloaded, new goods brought aboard, and off you go again, back to the same sea, under the same sails. There are soldiers aboard some ships, tax collectors on others. Occasionally, an official from Rome with soft hands and too many demands. But mostly, it's you and your fellow sailors, hauling Rome's wealth across the waves, risking your lives to keep the empire fed. You hear that some people believe Rome is invincible, that the empire will never fall. But out here, on the open sea, you know better. You've seen ships splinter like kindling. You've heard men pray to Neptune, to Jupiter, to Mercury, any god who might grant them safe harbor. You've seen the sky turn green before a storm. You've seen waves so tall they block out the sun. So tonight, when the sea is still and the wind is soft, you wrap yourself in your cloak and lie beside a crate of oil jars. And you whisper a quiet thank you, to no one in particular. Because tonight, your ship did not leak. Tonight, the wind was kind. But tomorrow? Tomorrow is another crossing. And nothing is guaranteed. Next, we return to land, and into the realm of belief and fear. Because when things went wrong in Rome, people blamed magic. And some of their curses were more terrifying than any storm. Why Roman curses were terrifying? Imagine it is night in Rome. The streets are mostly quiet now. A few lamps flicker on doorways. Dogs bark in the distance. But in the shadows of a temple courtyard, a man kneels beside a small clay jar. He is not praying. He is cursing. He holds a thin sheet of lead in one hand. It is soft, gray, cold to the touch. On it, he has scratched tiny letters, using a stylus or a nail. The words are not kind. They are names, sometimes one, sometimes many. And next to those names are commands. Wishes. Dark requests. May their tongue be twisted. May they lose their voice in court. May they fall down in the street. May they never win a race again. May their lover leave them. May their bones grow cold. This is a defixio, a curse tablet. They were common in ancient Rome. Not just in the city itself, but across the empire, from Britain to Egypt. People of all classes used them. They were angry, desperate, jealous, or hurt. There were curse tablets for rivals, thieves, athletes, business competitors, lovers, even neighbors who played their music too loud. The man rolls up the tablet and places it in the jar. Sometimes he adds nails, hair, or pieces of thread. Sometimes even bits of wax figures. Then he buries it. In a grave. In a well. In the foundation of a building. Some tablets were even nailed to temple walls, left for the gods to see. The writing was often deliberately messy, misspelled, full of strange symbols. Not because the writer was uneducated, but because confusion was believed to make the spell more powerful. It trapped the target, tangled them in language, and while not everyone believed in curses, many feared them. You could be cursed and never know it, but you might start to feel it. A run of bad luck, a lost job, a sudden illness. Was it just life? Or something else? Some Romans hired curse writers, men who specialized in magical language. Others visited sorcerers or witches, many of whom were women, who promised revenge for the right price. And there were counter curses, too. Protective charms. Spells to unbind what had been bound. The world was full of forces you couldn't see, and many Romans believed that even the gods listened when humans spoke in just the right way. Some tablets called on Mercury, god of messengers and trickery. Others called on chthonic gods, the deities of the underworld. Pluto, Hecate, Persephone, dark names for dark favors. Some simply addressed whoever watches, or spirits of the dead. The dead, after all, were believed to have power, especially those who had died young, violently, or without burial. Some tombs were filled with cursed tablets, not left for the dead, but used as a gateway, a place to send your message to the underworld. Many curses included words like, bind the hands of Marcus, let Lucia speak no more, freeze the feet of Gaius before the race. Simple, personal, and strangely modern, because underneath all the mystery, Roman curses reveal something deeply human. Fear, frustration, loneliness, a longing for justice, or control. Even now, archaeologists continue to find cursed tablets. In wells, in bathhouses, in graves. Dozens were found in the sacred spring at Bath in England. Some ask for stolen cloaks or lost rings to be returned. Others are more intense. One says simply, may the thief who took my shoes be unable to urinate. So now you rise from the dirt. The curse is buried. Your fingers are dusty, but your heart is calm. You've done all you can. You turn and walk away from the temple ruins, into the quiet Roman night. And next, we return to the noise and blood of politics. Because one man dared to speak too much, and Rome made sure he would never speak again. We will now witness the death of Cicero. Let us now leave the realm of whispered magic and step into the very public, very dangerous world of Roman politics. Words held power in Rome, but for one man, those words would cost him everything. This is the story of Cicero, and how a sharp tongue became a fatal weapon. Imagine you are standing in a Roman villa, just before sunrise. The air is cool. The sea murmurs nearby. You are Marcus Tullius Cicero, once the most celebrated orator in Rome. Your hands tremble slightly as you drink a bit of watered wine. You are no longer young. You are no longer safe. Once you were admired by senators, feared by criminals, and praised by the people. Now you are a hunted man. But let us go back before this final morning. Cicero was born in 106 BCE, not in Rome but in Arpinum, a small town in central Italy. He was not from the nobility, but from a wealthy family. Through study, brilliance, and ambition, he became a lawyer, then a senator, then consul. His speeches were famous, precise, passionate, and powerful. He exposed conspiracies. He crushed rivals. He loved the republic, the system of shared power, of debate and balance. And he feared the rise of dictatorship. So when Julius Caesar seized power, Cicero grew uneasy. When Caesar was assassinated, Cicero saw a chance to restore the old order. But Caesar's death did not bring peace. It brought a power struggle. And into this chaos rose Mark Antony, one of Caesar's loyal supporters. Cicero opposed Antony with everything he had. He gave a series of speeches known as the Philippics, modeled after those of the Greek orator Demosthenes. They were scathing. They called Antony corrupt, dangerous, unfit to lead. Cicero hoped the Senate would rally behind him. But power had shifted, and Antony did not forgive. In 43 BCE, Rome's fragile balance collapsed. A political alliance formed between Octavian, Caesar's heir, Lepidus, and Mark Antony, an alliance known as the Second Triumvirate. To secure control, they created a proscription list, a formal list of enemies to be executed and their property seized. Cicero's name was on it. There would be no trial, no defense, just death. And so Cicero fled. He moved from villa to villa, hoping to escape. His friends begged him to go overseas. But perhaps he was tired. Perhaps he knew the end was near. On that final morning, as the sun crept above the horizon, Cicero heard the hoofbeats. Soldiers approaching fast. He ordered his servants not to resist. He stood still. Some accounts say he stretched out his neck, inviting the blow. Others say he tried to speak one last time. But the soldiers did not wait. They killed him, there on the shore. They cut off his head. And, on Antony's cruel orders, his hands. The hands that had written his speeches. The tongue that had shaped Rome's politics. His head and hands were displayed in the forum, nailed to the speaker's platform. A message. A warning. A silence. But even in death, Cicero's words endured. His writings survived, on law, philosophy, duty, and friendship. He had once said, "A room without books is like a body without a soul." And many Roman homes, for centuries after, kept copies of his work. You may forget the names of emperors he wrote, but not the names of those who defended the Republic. So now, we leave behind the blood-stained platform and turn to a quieter trade. The hum of conversation, the flick of a razor, the soft scrape of bronze. Because in our next segment, you are a Roman barber, without soap, scissors, or much peace. You're a Roman barber, without soap or scissors. It is early morning in the city of Rome. The streets are just beginning to stir. Bakers open their ovens. Vendors set out their olives and onions. And you, a tonsтрix, a barber, are already opening the wooden shutters of your tiny shop. You don't have a grand building. Most barbers in Rome work in taberni, small open-air stalls at the edge of busy roads. Some work right on the street, next to fountains or bathhouses, where water is easier to come by. Your tools are few, and not very gentle. A bronze razor, a pair of dull shears, a bowl, a strigil for scraping. No soap, no shampoo, no warm towel. But you do have something else, customers. And soon they begin to arrive. A merchant in a hurry. A slave sent to get his master's beard trimmed. A young man preparing for a date. An old soldier who wants a shave and an argument. Because your job is more than just shaving chins and trimming curls. You are part barber, part gossip, part therapist. Your customers don't just come for grooming. They come for conversation. And it begins the moment they sit down on the low wooden stool. You ask no questions, but they start talking anyway. They complain about grain prices, about their wives, about politics, about their neighbors' goats. They argue about which gladiator is best. They speculate about whether that one senator is sick or just pretending. You nod, you grunt, you agree at the right time. And all the while you work. First, the hair. There are no electric clippers, no running water, no soft combs. You lift a coarse comb through their curls and start snipping with shears that haven't been sharpened in weeks. You blow away the fallen hair with a sharp puff. Next, the beard. You wet a cloth in cold water and wipe the face. Then comes the razor. Bronze. Flat. More like a tiny knife than anything else. It must be held at just the right angle. One slip and there's blood. There is no shaving cream. Only oil if the customer can pay for it. Most can't. So you go slowly, carefully, scraping away stubble, listening to the latest rumor about the governor's daughter or the strange smell in the bakery down the street. You finish with a brisk rub of a dry cloth. No lotion. No aftershave. Just a slap on the back and a muttered, "Next." There are no appointments. Just a line of waiting men, each with his own story, his own worries, and his own desire to look a little better than he did yesterday. You also offer other services. Plucking armpit hair. Popular among young Roman men. Removing head lice. Very common, though unpleasant. Sometimes even cutting toenails with the same shears. And yes, some customers ask for something extra. A tooth pulled. An ear cleaned. A mole removed. You do what you can. You are not a doctor. But you are trusted. And in a city like Rome, trust is currency. Children come by to giggle at the strange faces men make when the razor touches a sensitive spot. Dogs sniff at the discarded hair on the ground. You sweat at flies and try not to nick anyone. And all the while, the city hums around you. You may not be rich. You may not be important. But your fingers have shaped the faces of senators, soldiers, shopkeepers, and scoundrels alike. By the end of the day, your hands are tired. Your tunic is dusty. Your bench is covered in hair. You wash your tools in a bucket of cold water. You fold your cloths. And you sit for a moment, just listening to the voices still echoing in your head. Some people think of Roman barbers as lowly. But in truth, you are something like a mirror. Not just for faces, but for the city itself. Now we close the shutters and move on. Our next stop? A Roman schoolroom. But don't expect games and gentle teachers. Because in the Roman world, learning often came second to discipline. Roman schools, discipline over learning. It is early morning in ancient Rome. The sun has just risen. Birds flutter over the rooftops. And already, children are trudging through narrow alleys, their wax tablets tucked under their arms, their sandals slapping against the stones. You are one of them. You are about 7 years old, and you are headed to the Ludus Literarius, the basic school for Roman children. There is no school building, no tidy classroom with desks and painted walls. Your teacher, the literator, rents space in a portico or sets up shop in a corner of a temple courtyard, or even in a shaded alley. The only protection from the weather is a canvas hung overhead, flapping in the breeze. There is no school bell. When your teacher arrives, school begins. Your classmates are mostly boys, though a few wealthy girls are here too. Their fathers believe girls should know how to read and write, even if they won't use those skills much. You sit on a wooden bench or the ground. There are no cushions, no backrests. And your first lesson? Copying letters. You hold a stylus in your small fingers and press carefully into a tablet covered in soft wax. You trace the letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, again and again. Mistakes are scraped away and begun again. Your teacher walks among you with a rod in his hand. He does not smile. He does not praise. In Roman education, the guiding principle is discipline. Children are seen as naturally unruly. So you are punished often, even for small mistakes. A missed word, a crooked letter, too much talking. The rod is light, but it leaves red stripes across your knuckles. Older children may be beaten across the back or legs with sticks or leather straps. Teachers are allowed to punish without permission from parents. It is considered part of learning. Your school day is long. You might begin before sunrise and finish just after midday. There are no vacations, except on public holidays or days of bad weather. You have no toys, no chalkboards, no lunchroom. But you do have your books, or at least scrolls. Not many. Books are expensive, so you copy passages by hand over and over until they are memorized. Much of your education is rote learning. Repetition. Imitation. You recite aloud with your classmates, voices blending into a steady hum. Your early studies include reading, writing, and basic arithmetic. Counting is done with pebbles or an abacus. You learn your numbers the Roman way. IVXLC. Later, if your family is wealthy, you may move on to a grammaticus, a secondary teacher. There, you study poetry, history, and grammar in detail. You read works by Homer, Virgil, and Horace. You discuss Greek myths. But your teacher expects perfect memory. You may be asked to recite 50 lines of poetry from memory, without pause or error. If you cannot, the rod appears again. There are no special considerations for shyness, learning struggles, or boredom. The goal is to mold you into a proper Roman citizen, one who obeys, speaks clearly, and never questions authority. And for the truly ambitious, there is the reader, the final level. There you study rhetoric, the art of public speaking. You practice arguing in mock trials, debating philosophical points, pleasing a crowd. But very few make it that far. Most children finish basic schooling by age 12 or 13. Some go into apprenticeships, others into family businesses. Many girls are married by then. Only the wealthiest and most determined boys go on to study further. Still, you leave school knowing how to read and write. And that makes you one of a small minority in the empire. In Rome, most people are illiterate. Farmers, laborers, and many soldiers never learn to read. So despite its harshness, your education is a kind of power. You know your letters. You know how to argue. You know how to memorize, even if it came with bruised fingers and tired eyes. As the day ends, you blow gently on your wax tablet to cool it. You tuck it back under your arm, and you begin the walk home. Tomorrow you'll do it again. The same bench. The same rod. The same lines to copy. But for now, the sun is warm. And there's a piece of bread waiting for you at home. Next, we'll take a break from the classroom and enter the strange world of Roman pets. Because yes, Rome had dogs, cats, and birds. But also monkeys. And sometimes things got weird. Rome's pet monkeys and other weird trends. Imagine yourself walking through a Roman marketplace. It is lively as usual. Chickpeas roasting, linen flapping on stalls, voices calling out the day's prices. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, oil, and fresh bread. And near one of the wealthier booths, a woman in fine sandals is gently tugging a small monkey on a tiny leash. Yes, a monkey, dressed in a little tunic, perhaps with earrings, maybe even perfume dabbed on its fur. You pause and blink. But in ancient Rome, this is not unusual. Romans had pets. Not just dogs and cats, but birds, snakes, fish, ferrets, and yes, monkeys. The monkey is probably from India or North Africa. It was brought to Rome by ship, traded by merchants, sold by exotic animal dealers. Not cheap. A monkey could cost as much as a slave. But for the wealthy, it was the latest fashionable curiosity. And a way to show off. Monkeys amused Roman families. They mimicked gestures. They danced. They stole food from guests. They bit fingers. People laughed at their antics. Children adored them. Poets and writers mention monkeys, sometimes as jokes, sometimes with surprising affection. But monkeys were just the beginning. Romans also kept mice. Yes, little mice as pets. Sometimes they were kept in tiny clay cages called musaria. Children named them, fed them little bits of bread, watched them scurry and sleep. Other Romans preferred birds. Songbirds were especially popular. Thrushes, nightingales, and parrots that could mimic Latin phrases. You might walk past a villa and hear a bird cry out, "Ave!" a cheerful Roman greeting. Peacocks strutted through gardens. Pigeons were kept for beauty, not just messages. And some wealthier homes even had aviaries, birdhouses the size of small rooms, full of flapping wings and chirping song. Cats, too, were common, especially in Egypt and later across the empire. They caught mice, but they were also loved. Some were given collars. Some were buried with care. Others appear painted on household walls. Dogs, of course, were everywhere. Some were guard dogs, big, muscled, and intimidating. Others were lapdogs, small, white, curled into the arms of Roman matrons. The poet Martial even wrote epitaphs for pet dogs with lines like, "I am a puppy who knew how to play and love." But not all Roman pet trends were so sweet. Some people kept weasels and ferrets, mostly for pest control, but occasionally as companions. There are also records of more exotic creatures. Crocodiles in temple ponds, gazelles in courtyards, snakes fed by hand. Emperors had stranger tastes still. Caligula supposedly made his horse incitatus, a consul, though that may have been a joke or an insult to the Senate. Still, the horse lived in a marble stall and ate oats mixed with gold flakes. And then there were the fish tanks. Yes, wealthy Romans had glass-walled fish tanks, filled with brightly colored fish from the Mediterranean and beyond. They fed them by hand, watched them swim during dinner parties. Some gave them names. Others trained them to respond to bells. A few owners became obsessed with rare breeds, especially mullet, fish prized for their color and movement. One story tells of a man who cried more over his dead mullet than over his own relatives. So what do these strange Roman pet choices tell us? They show how much status and display mattered. Exotic animals were proof of wealth. But they also reveal a softer side of Roman life. Because despite their wars and taxes and terrible toilets, Romans still looked for comfort in the companionship of animals. They made little tombstones for them, painted their faces on walls, wrote poems about their absence. And even now, archaeologists still uncover pet collars with inscriptions like, "Hold me gently, I am your friend." So as you walk through the Roman city, you might see a man walking a parrot, or a boy cradling a ferret, or a monkey swinging from a merchant's shoulder, trying to snatch a fig. It is strange. It is charming. It is deeply human. And next, we take one last full breath before we explore something less pleasant. Because the Roman world was not just colorful and alive. It also smelled. And in our next segment, you'll find out exactly how. How Rome smelled, spoiler, not good. Close your eyes for a moment. Now take a breath. A deep one. If you were in ancient Rome, you might instantly regret that. Because Rome, the center of an empire, did not smell like roses. It smelled like people, animals, industry, and a great deal of waste. Let us walk together through an ordinary Roman street. The first thing that hits you is the heat. Even early in the day, the sun has begun to bake the stone roads and walls. And in that warmth, smells bloom. To your left, a butcher shop is open. Fresh meat hangs on hooks. Flies buzz around hunks of goat and pig. There is no refrigeration. No glass counter. Just blood pooling into the gutters. Next door, a fish seller is setting up trays of yesterday's catch. Sea bream, eel, salted mackerel. The air is sharp and sour, edged with brine and decay. A few steps away, a man squats at a public latrine. The toilets are communal, long benches with round holes, shared by many, with a water channel running below. There are no stalls, no privacy, just the sound of conversation and splashing water. And yes, the odor. The latrines are cleaned, but not enough. Sewer systems like the Cloaca Maxima help drain the waste, but they don't seal it off. Sometimes, the stink of sewage backs up into the streets. And that's just one source of it. Now you pass a laundry shop. You might think that would smell clean. But this is a phalanca, a Roman laundry that uses urine to wash clothes. Yes, urine. Collectors walk the streets with buckets, shouting for passers-by to contribute. Urine is prized for its ammonia content, which breaks down grease. Inside the shop, workers stomp on tunics in vats of stale pee. Later, they rinse and dry them, and sometimes perfume them with scented oils. But the smell of that first step sticks to everything. Now turn into a smaller alley. Here, chamber pots have been emptied directly onto the stones. Children run barefoot through the grime. Donkeys leave fresh dung as they haul carts. A slave with a broom tries to sweep the worst of it away. But most of it stays, slowly melting under the sun. In summer, it's worse. The air grows heavy, as if the city itself is sweating. Dead animals rotting produce old oil from taverns. All mix into a dull, constant background scent. Even the wealthier areas are not immune. In grand villas, perfumes and incense help mask the odors, but they do not erase them. And bathhouses, while refreshing, carry their own mix of smells: sweat, oils, wet towels, and the lingering scent of other people's bodies. Romans were aware of the problem. They burned myrrh, cinnamon, and frankincense in temples and homes. They chewed herbs to sweeten their breath. They hung sachets of flowers in clothing and hair. Some even carried small balls of scented wax to hold near their noses in crowded places. But the truth is, ancient cities were ripe. And Rome, the biggest of them all, was a constant bouquet of human life. There were no plastic trash bags, no sealed plumbing, no street cleaning trucks, just gravity, time, and a never-ending tide of activity. So when you dream of walking through ancient Rome, imagine more than marble and torchlight. Imagine the smell of it, the aroma of 1 million people living shoulder to shoulder, working, eating, sweating, burning, emptying, and enduring. Next, we will leave the senses behind and end our journey with a final reflection. Because the fall of Rome did not come all at once. It came slowly, a long, strange unraveling. And that, too, is part of why you probably wouldn't have lasted very long there. Why the fall of Rome was a long, slow slide. Imagine you are a Roman citizen in the year 370 CE. You live in a modest house in a city that still calls itself Roman. The aqueduct still brings water, sometimes. Your coins still bear the face of the emperor, though they feel lighter now, made of cheaper metals. You still go to the baths, when they are open, but something is different. Not broken, not shattered, just slower, thinner, less certain. The empire still stretches far on maps. From Britain to Egypt, from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. But its grip is weakening, and you can feel it. The markets are quieter, the roads less safe, taxes are higher, always higher. And more, you hear rumors of invasions, rebellions, and plots. But daily life goes on. Children still attend school. Farmers still sow grain. Senators still meet, though fewer attend. You do not wake up and think, Rome has fallen. You wake up and think, I hope the well has water today. The Western Roman Empire, centered in Rome and later Ravenna, did not collapse in a single night. It faded over a century or more. Economic troubles grew. Trade routes faltered. Local leaders took more power as central authority weakened. There were dozens of emperors, many only ruling for months before being assassinated or replaced. Civil wars drained money and trust. Armies were no longer full of proud Roman citizens. They were filled with mercenaries, loyal mostly to gold. And beyond the borders, new peoples were rising. The Goths, the Vandals, the Franks, once feared as outsiders, were now sometimes allies, sometimes invaders. In 410 CE, the city of Rome was sacked by the Visigoths. Shocked the world, yes, but the empire didn't end. In 455 CE, Rome was sacked again by the Vandals. People fled. Buildings were burned. But still, Rome limped on. Finally, in 476 CE, the last Western emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was removed from power. There was no battle, no great speech. He was simply deposed by a Germanic general, Odoacer, who sent the imperial symbols back to Constantinople and ruled Italy in his own name. That, some say, was the end. But in many ways, life simply continued. In the countryside, peasants still worked the fields. In towns, markets still opened. Roman law, language, and customs didn't vanish. They slowly transformed. The Eastern Empire, based in Constantinople, would go on for nearly another 1,000 years, becoming the Byzantine Empire. And in churches and schools, in languages and law codes, Rome would linger, long after the Senate had fallen silent. So what was it like to live during the fall? It was not like watching a wall crumble. It was like watching the light fade day by day. A temple roof sags and is never repaired. A stone road cracks and is left to weeds. A teacher moves away and no one replaces him. A coin is clipped, then clipped again, until it is barely worth the metal it holds. A noble family vanishes, their name remembered only in dust. And through it all, life continues. There are births and weddings, songs and laughter. People adjust as people always do. You might live your whole life in the final century of Rome, never quite knowing it was ending. Only later would scholars and poets give it a name. The fall. But for you, it was just life. Harder than before. Quieter than before. But still yours. Still real. Still Roman.